by definition want to continue existence of the prohibited item because you want to be the one who destroys it to get paid for it as opposed to being destroyed its own. So there's a Savua, second rank in the top 64. Savua Amar, who's a baby, who's a Yaki, who's a Yaki, Amar, and the kind of the lion with it. Very interesting. Keep a hold on it in general. Not only is there a prohibition to plant killing, not only is there a prohibition to go ahead and facilitate the growth of killing, but you can't even do anything that sustains that. So for example, over here, but let's say someone is trying to kill an animal, right? Alcohol flies, and that asks me to put up a fence around the community. And the Akiva says, also, why? Because the act of putting up a fence, by definition, is part of the sustaining of killing. Even though putting up the fence has nothing to do with the actual plant itself, nevertheless, it is going to be also for the saying, here we go. Nefesh means weaving. The means covering the seed with dirt. So nefesh and the look at, we get all excited because you guys take more, but there you're actively and directly participating in the driving of God. The Kiva says, up the kind. And the Kiva says, even if you do anything to sustain the Kiva, for example, put up the fence around the Kilayim, that's going to be problematic as well. Where's the Kiva? What's his name? Sadcha Tizra Kilayim. Plus it says, do not plant Kilayim in the field. In the Azarea, I will not a prohibition of planting. The Kayim, how do I know that I'm not even allowed to do something to sustain the actual growth itself, like even like putting up the fence? Amalomar, lo Kilayim. I suppose they say it's interesting over here. So you guys making a little bit of a play on words. So again, the Gemara is actually kind of slicing the house like low kilayim. You can't do anything that ultimately again enables the existence of kilayim, even if it's not directly involved with the actual plant itself, but just something that sustains it. That's going to be asur. Ilu, Gemara says the ilu, the ilu they get the shari. But ultimately, interestingly enough, even if we're going to keep up, how do you going to keep up? The prohibition ultimately is doing something that sustains the plant. What about if somebody's going to pay me to uproot the So in Ashkosh, it sounds like that is going to be very interesting. It says not necessarily. No, it doesn't be that in the rather unlike this Rabbanon. It's the Rabbanon. In Rabbanon, right here, you're open a few Yemi Shabbat. No, it's not true. According to the Rabbanon, this is Rabbanon. Rabbanon knows to put the fence. Rabbanon only that you keep up. Rabbanon is from opening the fence to get planted. Or actively do something that facilitates the growth of the plant itself. Some type of like supporting a tree, like putting up a fence, is mental. So putting up a fence is mental. You can get paid for that, and certainly again you can get paid for uprooting the fence. So it's not going to be a job. To which the Gemara says, Afama Askina is very interesting. What's the case over here? Interesting. Where ultimately, again, I am uprooting the kilayim for free. Yaakov asked me to do it, and I'm doing it for free. So what's the problem? Ultimately, that is of the opinion that Allah Almighty, you are not allowed to have favor for it. Like we actually had this in the beginning of our time. Most of our name, all my friends as well, most of our name means. That doesn't mean compliment them, but give them it says, don't do nothing for free. You can't just anything that happens for free. Even if the free favor is destruction of all Zara, you still can't be like, Nishmal Rabbi Akiva, the fact that you're setting this up so according to Rabbi Akiva, this will not be permitted. Also, Likin and Rasina, Avalin, Tifla, Shakri. Gemara says, no, according to Rabbi Akiva, as Buddha says, it's true. You can't do a favor so as to give a free gift. You can't do a favor for it. But to do something to uproot our desire, that's absolutely permitted. That's an objective benefit. I have Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva Nami. I thought that's Rabbi Akiva. I'm Rabbi Akiva, I'm a kind of line wrote there. And then we take Tifla Shakri. You say something according to Rabbi Akiva. Even though Rabbi Akiva was a more expansive approach to the prohibition of Kilai, they're not only doing that planting, not only canceling the actual planting itself, but you can even put up a fence to sustain it. Even the Akiva would agree to uproot Kilai, to get rid of the Sir, to get into prohibited, is absolutely permitted, and you can get paid for that from the which the Gemara says is soon low. There is nothing else to go ahead and discuss. Yes, it's great. This phrase, Sulamidi, this is like becoming the equivalent of like a mic drop. You know, Sulami, you know, that's it, we're done. We're done. There's nothing more to discuss about this. So those, it's very interesting. And therefore, what this means is, what happened? Now, let's go full circle. How did we start with this? This all started by the case of an Akram wants to destroy, wants to break his barrels of Yainess. He asks me, he wants to hire me, a Jew, to go and break his own, pay me $50 a barrel. Great, so I'm not allowed to do it or not. So remember, on one hand, you can say no, because therefore that means I want the continued existence of the Yainess. So I'm benefiting from the Avodah Zarah. On the other hand, I'm destroying the Avodah Zarah. But Nachman said, do it and cover Allah. If it involves the destruction of a Zara, or for that matter, a prohibited item, even though, yes, I do want the continued existence of the Ines, so I get it. I don't want it to break on its own. I don't want to break it. I don't want the plant to be uprooted on its own. I want to uproot it. But nevertheless, I am permitted to go ahead and do these activities, get paid for them, and keep the proceeds, because the destruction of evil, the destruction of Zara, the destruction of prohibition ultimately is a good thing. It says you get paid and Tavo Allah. Incredible. I will say it really is such an interesting idea because kind of like part of Western society, the mindset is, like live and let live. And that is important. As members of society, just as a general approach to living in a greater society, we should both take an approach to living. Yes, you know what? It's not your obligation to be against the Lord, nor is it your place to stand in judgment of everyone else's lifestyle choices or everything else. Live and let live. That's to a certain degree, that has to be our approach to living in society. On the other hand, it's also teaching us this idea that evil shouldn't be allowed to take the root within our world. And when there's something that is evil, it has to be uprooted. When there's something that is evil, it has to be broken. When there's something that is evil, it has to be smashed. It has to be destroyed. Because if you let evil take the root, it spreads and unfortunately becomes the norm. And sometimes then those lines between good and evil ultimately again become incredibly blurry. That's why the Matthew uses this lashon of yes, destroy the INS and toggle Allah love. Ridding the world of evil is a bracha. It is a bracha. It's not easy. It's not easy. And it's fraught with incredible challenges. We see this come up. Think about such an incredible thing. Just think about what the nation of Israel, the state of Israel, is doing to meaning of people. And sometimes you would think that like the world would just run false, like just flat. We're doing the world's observable. And yet again, it's hard. Because often the world can't see what's evil, what's good, can't see who's right and who's wrong. But the Nachman tells us sometimes there is a little of good, and sometimes the Nachman says, Yishbar, sometimes you have to identify evil, you have to break it, you have to smash it, you have to destroy it, and once you do it, the process is difficult, the process is good, the process is overwhelming. But ultimately, when you get to the other side of the process, that's where it's good. The Gemara goes like this. When Hadri Yasvi, so again, the same federalist name, and the Ethno Udashin, yes, Hadri Yasvi, the kind of like, they have those reality of Hadri. So that's it. This is very interesting. What happens if an Akum sells his item? So Akum sells his item and he has now $4,000, he's got $1,000. Does that money in the hands of the Akum take on the same identity as the Akum who sells it? No. Mitofes has done that the other week. No, does it take on the identity? Right? Does it take on the identity of the idolatry or not? So I'm going to nothing. So it's very interesting. So ultimately, again, this that with now is from the other people having me come. So Matthew says, I think it's good. I think it's good to get this. He sells his idol, and he has that money. That money is not this idolatrous identity, but rather that money is just mundane. Listen to this. Here's enough of these proof. I know that the Aslu made the Rabbi. So when these people came up with Rabbi, what? Honorably, Zilu Zivinu Hamad Istafu, the Zil scouts. It's fascinating. So enough of what it goes. When these people came up with Rabbi, what happened? I see the Rabbi, and they wanted to convert. Baba told them, guys, before you convert, here's what you need to do. Sell off all of your idolatry, right? Sell off all of your idolatry, and then you have the cash. After you do that, then you convert. So listen, I watch this. What's going on over here? Rashi says over here, look at Rashi. Look at the Suez Cairo. All of this Cairo, the Lachash Cairo, also really quite often all this stuff. Because remember, if they convert and it's still only idolatry, then that's idolatry owned by a Jew. Idolatry owned by a Jew, number one, can never be gained, right? Can never have its identity. They've taken another. So it tells them instead before, while you're still Gentiles, sell it off. You have the money, then you can convert to the money is committed. What do you see from there? Obviously, you see from the Allah, the nice sign, sells his idol, that cash is committed. So the Gemara says, nighttime, right? You shouldn't become severed, the male, let's go come down, they come the proceeds of the sale of idolatry are in the hands of the ultimately is permitted. I have to go and shine us in the kingdom that I can delay, God, I bought that. Since the process of conversion, obviously they're negating the theological significance of the idol converted. So an apple can be the vessel is a result. So maybe that's why the proceeds are. Now the Gemara says, here's the truth. Yisrael Shai Moshe Rabbeinu Baruch Machar, although those spoke of him, I lent $1,000. So what happened? So the uncle went and sold his item, right, and brought me the proceeds from the sale. Or Yain Nessa, the same case, I went ahead and I lent him $1,000. He sold his Yain Nessa, and then he brought me the proceeds of the sale. What's that? Well, mutter. Ultimately, again, it's mutter. Interesting. The Gemara says, now, however, watch this. Something we actually Yain Nessa, La Vila Fas. Let's say the actual same case, $1,000. So they use me in Romania, I'm supposed to sell my oil. I'm going to sell my Yain Nessa, in that case, see here, interesting. Case number one, same case. I lent Uncle $1,000. Case number one, he goes off, sells his item, goes off, sells his Yain Nessa. I have no idea what he's doing. He brings me the proceeds, pays back the debt, moved to case number two, same thing, I lent him $1,000. He says, I want to pay you back. Give me a couple of hours. I got to sell my idol. I got to sell my Nessa. He comes back with the proceeds are prohibited. I corrected the Gemara. My generation, my generation. So what's the distinction? I don't say, what's the difference in these two cases? Rosheshas, Sifa, Yushun, Abimelech, Kirotze, so this is very serious. So now this is the circle back over the dead from the previous circle. Here's the difference. In the second case, where the apple says, wait here while I sell my item, or while I go ahead and sell my wine, I want the continued existence of the continued existence of the wine, because I want to get paid. So because I want it, therefore Shesha's assets, the proceeds are hustled. If you notice it, that's what we just said before, but that's not. But that's not. And I was also saying, when you want the continued existence, but I'm not doing anything to further the existence. So yes, of course, I want the continued existence of that idol until the object sells it for a lot of money. I want the continued existence of the INSF because I want the money. But I'm not doing anything to facilitate the continued existence of these particular items. Why should it be us? Batanan, Garrett, Shiyarshu Abiyan This is very interesting. You have two brothers. One converted, and one they're both brothers. One converted and one is not. So brother Garrett and brother Arthur. And what happens? Their father died. Their father died, and they inherit their father. So they all split the estate. In the estate is idolatry and Nasa, and let's say turning it items. So Tier got the Loma Mol from Akabos for Animals. So Ati Yainasa Kanideos. So brother Ger is saying to brother Akon, so brother Akon, you take all the idolatry stuff, you take all the Yainasa, and I'll take the money and the nails. You can do that. The Shabbat, and that's cool. However, the Shabbat is just like your ass. All of this presupposes that the heir has not yet actively taken possession of the Inessa or items. Obviously, once that happens, there's no more recourse. Right? But well, there is recourse. No reason to see this. You can get an offer to be the mother of Sarah, but it's much more complicated. Once the Jew only owns it, you very little. So as long as brother Ger has not yet taken possession of these items, no problem. There's no problem dividing up the estate. However, if brother Ger already took possession, then it's possible. So they'll say, so ultimately, again, what do you see from there? Now, in this case, brother Ger wants to continue the existence of the idolatry of the Yayin Esaf, but he's not doing anything active to promote its continued existence, and therefore it's mutter. It's mutter. So what's the problem? What's the case over in this Mishnah? This Mishnah is talking about an idol that's made out of gold or silver, which means that even if it breaks, it's still valuable. So therefore, again, brother Ger doesn't actually care if it remains in its full state or not. Because even if it breaks, who cares? It still has value. Which the Gemara says that's fine. That works fine for an idol. How would you explain the case then of Yayin Nesef? The Pharos Hadray. So this is very interesting. Adriatic. So apparently, Rashi points out that here, Adriatic also there, it's very absorbent. Therefore, when you put wine in there, the earth will absorb the wine to a degree that you can take a shard of that earthenware, put it in the water, and reconstitute water. In that case, also, brother here doesn't care if the casks break or not. It doesn't make a difference because either way, the value is still retained. To which the Gemara says, even if that's so, even if brother Gad doesn't care about the fact that he didn't break, right? But he does care whether or not he gets still washed, so he still was in a continued existence. Papa, Yerushas, Hager comment, don't bring a riot in this case. You're bringing a riot, bring the proof in the case of the inheritance of Hager. No, Shani Yerushas Hager, Dakilu Baraba. Rabbis were makeled by the Yerusha. Normally the Gemara says perhaps this case should be problematic. But halacha l'maisa, Chazal were makeled by the Yerusha. And as long as the ger has not yet actually taken possession of the Yainesa, the idols, he's absolutely permitted to work this out with his brother. Right? And so you take this, you take whatever this stuff, I'll take the stuff. Even though, yes, he wants to continue existence. Why? Why would they make a by a ger? Like people are going on, we are afraid that if the ger has to make a choice between his money, his Yerusha, and his virgin, he will choose his money, he will choose his inheritance. So that's not a matter of the ger. That's a reality of human nature. It's fulfilled as well, for example, right? This is something that was the Shah. Chazal said that in certain cases, theft, the thief doesn't always have to return that which he stole. Right? And the victim should not accept that was stolen item. Why? In order to go and facilitate the thief's truth. Great if the thief has to return everything, he's not going to be difficult for people to engage in self-sacrifice when it comes to financial things. Right? Money is necessary. Money is important. And as much as we say, as long as you have your health, it's true. As long as you have your health and you can pay your bills. Right? Because if you don't have money, just things are like and many people did not stand up to religious challenges. There was a choice between religion and were afraid that if he has to choose between halacha and ultimately again his Yerusha, he may be tempted to choose his Yerusha. Again, not because of it, because it's human nature. So if Chazal we don't want to put him in that situation, they're going to make a by it there, and we're saying that often in this kind of case, he's going to have an estate that is comprised of committed items and committed items, therefore allow him to keep the committed items, give his brother over the this. Imagine what is this so? Shirshu, when he thinks let's say a business partnership will be also. So you see from here that Chazal allowed certain things to happen in the context of Yerusha that they were not normally allowed to occur in the context as well. Because we don't have put the person in this role of the air in this precarious situation. Incredible. Other yes and five dollars. Remember again, all this is the same people who are sitting together. Another question that came up. Ger Tosha Mao Shivat Va'avodas. So let's say this is a very interesting case. Can a Ger Tosha, go ahead and let's say just before we go on, just this idea that Chazal when they go by the Ger, just so you understand the tremendous difference with this. Halacha is structured in a way to make us succeed. That a Ono Shalom wants us to succeed. Sometimes people have a very sweet feel about Harish Baruch, a very sweet feel of Halacha. Harish Baruch is waiting for us to mess up, so we can see our stuff. It's all waiting for us to mess up, so we can let yourself like a Harish Baruch. That's a pretty cool issues. The emotion wants our success more than we want our success. Chazal want our success more than we want our success. All of the halachas, all of the rules, all of the scriptures, all of the punishments are only there to put us on a path to success, not to smack us down when we go ahead and we make a mistake. But again, Mishpach understood what we need in order to be successful. Chazal understood what we need in order to be successful. And when they need to relax the standards to make us successful, they do it. Incredible. They do it. When success is accomplished through relaxing of standards, Chazal do that. Know that you have no greater application in this world. That's in this world and in the next world. In this world, Chazal constantly promoting success. Okay, another question. Other yes and no. Ger Toshav, Moshe Batwas. It's very interesting. Can a Ger Toshav go ahead and abolish or negate idolatry? Remember, an apple has the ability to negate his idols, well, thereby decommissioning it from its status of theological significance. So a Ger Toshav wants to know what is a Ger Toshav. Now we're going to see this in the third this definition of Ger Toshav. Now she points out from the top of the daf, Ger Toshav, Eino Ovid Avodas Kofar. Ultimately, again, he doesn't worship idolatry. But again, he's like an apple in everything else, except he doesn't worship idolatry. It's a pretty good thing. Right? He believes in Mishpach, he believes in God, he does worship idolatry, but in every other respect, he's a nation. So does such a person have the ability to decommission idolatry, to negate idolatry? So Gemara says, on one hand, the Kadach Mevatel Lo Kolachim. He's saying only one who worships idolatry can decommission idolatry. Or maybe not, or we say like this: anyone who's what we call a bar mineh. If you're in the parsha of an apple, then you can go ahead and decommission idolatry. And this guy is in the parsha. It's not Jewish. It's not Jewish. So because he's not Jewish, he's in the parsha of an apple. So he himself doesn't worship idolatry, but he has the thought to go ahead and negate it. Otherwise, only will wrap left. So they also left in ways stand up the Chalach Nevada or Palachim. Left says, no, only someone who worships it can negate it. But someone who doesn't worship idolatry cannot negate idolatry. Therefore, the Ger Toshav doesn't have the ability to negate idolatry. So what's the basic question? That's what's happening. So went ahead and found idolatry in it. That's in the marketplace. What's that? Actually, a boss in the so that's it. So now remember again. So let's say, listen to this case. I'm walking in the shop, I'm walking in the marketplace. I see a kid, sitting there on the ground. If I lift it up, that's part of it, right? Or what is required by a Jew, essentially, can't be beaten. So what do I do? Actually, a boss in so before I pick it up, over the oven get having with that. I can pull over an apple. Remember what else we had here? Pull over an apple and see the apple. They need you to negate this decommission. Right? Theological decommission. So go ahead and engage with theological decommission. It's permitted. However, again, in the Shabbat Salidogo, they don't only open but again, take possession of it. At that point, you cannot be decommissioned. They should know Ovid Kochaven Nevada Avodas Kochaven Shalom Shachavim. And Ovid Kochaven Nakum, the decommission is on Avodah Zarah or the Avodah Zarah of his friend. Day of Da, Day Shein of. Whether he worships it or he doesn't worship it. My dog, my what does it mean to work? What does it mean that Mishnah whether he worships it or doesn't worship it? If you want to say that wasn't talking about Yaakov, then Hayu Shalom Shachadu, we already said, we just said before that Yaakov has the ability to actually decommission his Avodah Zarah and the Avodah Zarah of his friend. And a lot of the Ovid Kohanim, Allah, of the Ovid Kohanim, right? Ultimately, again, of the means natural Akhir. And my shipping of the, what does it mean? Come down to worship her? Oh. So who is able to go ahead and decommission both an actual Gertosha Shmamino, Gertosha Nanivata. What do you see from here? That a Gertosha has the ability to be Navato, ultimately, if you watch the decommission of a Yisrael. Incredible. Bruce Spinner says, no. The ultimate Navato is action. Rather, if I will be the only person to decommission of a Yisrael as an actual idol worship I did the comment. I will show up Shafar. He said, already said that. Then the price is right. He's already said that he bought a decommission. His Avodah and his friend's Avodah. The Gemara says relations to this. It's two different cases. Reisha, Zeh, Zeh Lepar, Zeh, Zeh Lemarcus. Reisha is teaching whatever this. If you have two apples, right, and both worship alcohol, or both worship Marcus, obviously again, apple one could negate his idol and his friend's idol, and apple two could negate his idol and his friend's idol. Seifa, Zeh Lepar, Zeh Lemarcus. Oh, the Seifa is teaching something different. Let's get one who worships Marcus and one who worships Baal Ha'ar. What's the analogy over here? An apple who worship an idolatry even if he doesn't worship. So we'll say, so there are really three halachas we play. Number one, the apple can negate his own idolatry. Good. Number two, an apple can negate his friend's idol if they worship the same idolatry. And halacha number three is an apple can negate his friend's idolatry even if he worships a different. Incredible. So the Gemara says, but again, no riot had a Ger Tosha. Right? So when it comes to a Ger Tosha, we still like the Ger Tosha, and a Ger Tosha, which is a Gentile, who repudiated idolatry, can he live out well? That is still an answer. Rest basically is Tasha, basically Ger Tosha. What's a Ger Tosha? Tosha Kiba. So what's this? Now we're getting to our definition. What is the definition of a Ger Tosha? Said Tosha Kiba is making up Caleb. Meir says it's any apple who has accepted upon himself and trying to free Chabad. There's a cover it's still right before someone's careful about it. So in this context, the Russians are just means a thing for a base. Anytime an apple becomes objective of base, of Talmud from the Chaverim, and he repudiates idolatry, that's a Ger Tosha. That's a Ger Tosha. Good, that's what I meant. From say, Tosha Kiba Allah Sheva Mitzvos. Tosha Kiba Allah Sheva Mitzvos. Some say a Ger Tosha is any Gentile who has accepted upon himself the seven nullified. Don't see to apply the base. That's a Ger Tosha. Sheva Mitzvos B'nei the next Ger Tosha. Here in Omrim, in the Baal the Ger Tosha. Not true. Caleb saying natural authentic, neither of these definitions satisfy the definition of Ger Tosha. What is a Ger Tosha? And what is a Ger Tosha? Zeh Ger Ofen Levelos, Shekiba Allah B'Kolim Kol Mitzvos Amuros B'Torah, Chutz Me'Isser Levelos. So this is very interesting. What is the definition of a Ger Tosha? A Ger Tosha is someone ultimately again who eats that kosher levelos when he has accepted upon himself the rest of the mitzvahs to the Torah. It's a pretty shocking definition. It was like really my focus on the definition of the Ger Tosha. Rabbi Meir, he accepted upon himself in front of the base of Hafrosh and idolatry. Chachamim, he accepted upon himself Shem Yisrael. Chayrim, he has accepted upon himself all of the mitzvahs except for the truth. He's not in that kosher. Incredible. And the Bible goes on. Yachad bin Etzlo, Yain, Bafilu B'Yesher Ruben Yisrael. That's what I love is the cause is wrong with the Ger Tosha, right? You can leave it with him for a little bit of time. I should say you can leave with him wine for a short amount of time, but you can't deposit using wine for a long amount of time. Now, what's the reason? What are we concerned about over here? What are we concerned about over here? We're concerned ultimately again that Rashi says Rashi says over here, Yisrael Maniach Afanusa Achiyilech even the Allah, though no government asset, we're not going to come to us in the Allah base of affection. Even the Ino, I know the craft, Ino Manit, we got a lot. You say, it's my own mua, that kind of way. So ultimately, again, you can deposit wine with him for a short amount of time. Not for a longer amount of time, because we're concerned that he may swap out the juice wine for his own wine. Okay. And this is true even in a city where the majority of the inhabitants are Jews. So as I said, Allah says here for Shab, you could leave with wine for a short amount of time. Not for a long time, give it up to Yain Nesa. Why up to Yain Nesa? Because he's repudiated idolatry. Right? But we are concerned that over time, for a longer amount of time, he may switch his wine for the Jews. So for a short amount of time, it's mutter, for a long amount of time, also. Shmano, Kiyeva. So the Gemara says, and his oil is like his oil. What is that? Shmano, Kiyeva, I like that. Shemen, Mika, Havi, Yain. That's not both of you with his oil. Oil can't be into it. Allah, Yengo, Kishmano. Interesting enough, that what he uses like this. Allah, from what I saw, that ultimately again is wine. His wine is like his wine, just like but just like his oil is permitted, so to ultimately again is wine. Fashion Shmano being Hamidiyas and Yeno Mutabana, Shmano Kodo Shoko Hashem Bakshi about the Shia Asa. But what does it mean that his oil is like that? Excuse me. That his wine is like his oil. For the sake of which you get a drop from his oil, get a drop from his bread. You can't drink the wine of the bread for sure. But ultimately, you can get a drop from his bread. The sharp, both dollar, ultimately, that for every other thing, whatever you probably do, is like a, is like a like an apple. Shouldn't order Yeno Yayin. Yes. Fa'amilei motor, fa'amilei motor mishkin. Shimon says his wine is like yayin esach, but others say ultimately again, it's motor, ultimately again before consumption for shkia. So actually calls up the open. We'll pick up against Hashem. Actually, let's finish. Let's finish the super. Anything else? What do you see from here? That's anything else. With the shard car, are you building club? You see from here that it's like an apple regarding every other matter. L'mayhu himself, ultimately, again, the reason when they say that a Kedusha is like an apple as what is that? First, the Gemara says, love the Mavaka of a Western Chavim, Kat of a Western Chavim. So it doesn't get the Kedusha when they kind of was causing that great Kedusha in this time. That's starting with the trying to figure out, does it get Kedusha how you gate idolatry? Because you're last thing definition idolatry. So now you just got finished saying that in this respect, Kedusha is unique. But in the other matter, he's like an apple. Doesn't that mean it just doesn't can theologically decommission and negate that whole Messiah, so teach and get kosher. So you can get kosher. For which the Gemara says, no, leaking the shus in the mouth of the shus. No, actually uses the rest. He's actually what is the Shas? What's the rest? It's being Samuel. So, right? The Shadow Shabbos is the Messiah. Eruv Hazaras. If you have multiple homes that open up into a courtyard, you cannot carry from a home into a courtyard without impedance. Right? Eruv essentially means we collect food from all of the inhabitants of the Chaser. They join together, and that joint food looks into the domain of one home. It's an entire from the home into the Chaser, plus into the home. And the halacha is if you have a Jew who did not join into the Chaser, he can yield his rights. Let's say if Shabbos started, forgot to participate in even forgot to participate in the Eruv, he can yield his rights to the other members of the Chaser. If there is a non-Jewish resident, the halacha is you have to rent his rights. You cannot simply yield his rights, you have to rent his rights from him. So watch this. The Gemara says, Yisrael Mother, Shara Shabbos of the Shor, Nevada Roshis. Ultimately, again, if you have Yisrael Mother, Russian here, Yisrael to an apostate. So as long as externally, he's not an apostate, right? As long as externally, like right in public, he keeps Shabbos. Privately, he doesn't keep Shabbos. And at least in public, he keeps Shabbos. And that's the halacha. Without the Roshos, all he needs to do, if he didn't participate in the Eruv, he just needs to essentially yield his rights to someone else in the process. Shemesh Shabbos Roshos, maybe without the Roshos, but again, if he publicly violates Shabbos, then essentially it's like he's like an athlete, then it's not enough for him to yield his rights and pass it to the other residents. Rather, you have to rent his rights from him. They Shamru, Yisrael, no sin Rishos, right? Yisrael ultimately again has the ability to go ahead and yield his right, give up his rights, or give over his rights to the other residents. But only Kohanim actually Yisrael, right? Ultimately, you have to rent. You have to rent. So therefore, again, the verse saying that when we say, so let's say just first finish up Ketzad, over Allah, we'll say how does it, for example, yield his rights to his rights to the other. Over Allah, you should see clearly. I hereby give over my rights. Right? I give my rights to the Chashas. Or you should see the Vutalas, or my rights are negated to you. Ultimately, it works for the purposes of the residents acquire the rights of this non-participatory Jews who participate in the Thanks for this question. So just in general, about Erev Chatzilos, again, you need the participation of all Jewish residents. In general, if you have a Jewish resident who did not participate, even on Shabbos, he can yield his rights, or he will not, or just simply negate his ownership rights when the Chazon allows everyone else to utilize the Chazon. Even if he's in Yisrael Mula, as long as publicly the process is Jewish, ultimately, again, he can yield, or he can go ahead and by an apple, you have to go ahead and acquire his rights. And Yisrael Muller, who's publicly a Muller, is treated like an full circle. Therefore, when we said before that a Ger Kosher, ultimately, again, it's treated like an apple. For all other things, the little things which a Ger Kosher, you are choosing a Chatzar want to take the food of potatoes, they must rent space, they must rent the rights, ultimately, again, of the Ger Kosher. Now, whether or not the Ger Kosher is actually going to be the Sarah, the Eretz Yisrael say, you will see it tomorrow's daf. Shpech, everyone, what a daf, wonderful experience that just facilitated all of you. Wishing everyone. I will say a great sponsorship to be able to tell with all of you this morning. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Cheer to thank our annual Torah sponsor. Tosim Shulchan Aruch Yisrael dedicated Holy Trinity Drushos this year is a Swiss from Sales to Israel. And Torah sponsors for the month of Abraham and Torah Stephen Randy Drazen in honor of their parents, Israel Drazen, Dina Drazen, and Lee Rosenzweiger in memory of Stanley Rosenzweiger on the Racha. Our week of learning sponsors, Dr. Eddie Faith Wolf, promotion of the yard site of Dr. Wolf's father, Cyrus Wolf, Shalom Ben Tzvi Hirsch's on the Racha, Nathan and Beth Adler in memory of their father, Ben Adler, Father Baruch Mordechai Ben Moreno Ramos. Young sponsors for today, Jerry Applebaum, in memory of his beloved mother, Rosalind Applebaum, Rachel Bas, Ben Harry, the merit of our Torah, all the missionaries, the families in their family, all those who were through Shalom, full for ladies, Dr. Shemir, all of our hostages, Shalom and Bukhara, allow our holy soldiers to be successful in the fall of our city. For those with that, let us begin. Today's death is $7.64. Incredible job ahead of us. Today we are picking up from Samach Gimel on the base 63b, and we are picking up 2, 4, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom. So Rav Nachman Ula Ba'adini Bar Papi. So again, Rav Nachman Ula Ba'adini Bar Papi. Yasser Abichia Bar Ami Dabai. And Abichia Bar Ami was sitting with them. And Yosef, the Kabbalah, and he asked the following question. Listen to the fascinating question. Safra Lishbar B'Yayin Nesach. What is the halacha if an Akum hires a Jew to smash barrels of yayin? Right? So if an Akum comes over to Ruvain, so Ruvain, I'm going to pay you $50 an hour. Do me a favor, smash these barrels of yayin. Mahu, what is the halacha? Is the Jew allowed to receive, to accept, to keep the wages from this halacha? So remember again, in yesterday's daf, we were dealing with the concept of funds or income that is generated from what may or may not be permitted activity, or dealing with items that themselves may be asur b'amas. Here, the Akum is asking me to do something with Yayin Nesef, and he's asking me to destroy Yayin Nesef, and he's going to pay me for it. So am I allowed to keep those proceeds? The Gemara says, "No, what's the halacha? We are going to keep the rest of the asur." This is very interesting. On one hand, I want the existence of the Yayin Nesef. Now, why do I want the existence of the Yayin Nesef? Because if the barrels were to break on their own, I would lose the opportunity to break them, and I'd lose the barrels. So on one hand, interestingly enough, I want the existence of the Yayin Nesef. So because I want it, therefore, then maybe that makes the process. But look at Rashi, just a moment. Miyat Rinon Kivan, 3 lines up from the bottom of Rashi. The Israel Zerlotze Bikiyuvan Shafam Yosef. Jew actually wants the existence of these barrels. Shalom Yishtabru Hashem Lamb. I don't know. Ruben doesn't want them to break on their own. She Shabru Green. So then we say that since the Jew actually wants, and this is interesting to think about this, right? The Jew actually wants the Yayin Nesach to remain in existence. I don't want it to break on its own. So therefore, maybe that's considered to be proceeds from the Yayin Nesach, and therefore, again, it's awesome. On the other hand, this is an instruction of the INS, instruction of Rabbi Rothschild. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. Sure, I want vows to remain in existence. Again, ultimately, to destroy those Zara is a good thing. And therefore, the proceeds, ultimately, again, should be committed. Fascinating chapter. Come on now. So Nachman says, Yishkar b'chol Rabbi. And Nachman says, no, take the job, Jew, take the job, get the money, and tell our brother we should be blessed. You have the opportunity to go or you root out of Zara. That is a good thing. Take the money and go. So the most let me say this. Let's bring a proof to this. Let's treat it on that. Ain't Ochi in a big from the point. Let's say again. I could plants kill out, right? Plants the big mixtures. Wheat had such just 2 years ago. Wheat and let's say for example wheat and grape farms. That's what I would get. So we put it into a big mixture. So if an ovid baham is planting Kohanim, the Jew can't go ahead and assist him in the farm. Is like home. You see covering with dirt. You can't do that. How about son of Dalit? 64. Appropriately, what can I do? I can uproot, right? I can uproot Kilai. That I am allowed to do. Look at Rashi. About Ogrin, Lashlifa Leibur Ba'afal of Devote the Kumash Le'akum Elin Achakam. Let's say Akum hires me and it's listen, silver. Do me a favor, I planted Kilai. Now again, but let's say again, he asks me to uproot it. I am allowed to do that even though I'm going to get paid for working with Kilai, right? And I want the existence of the Kilai. Because if the client's not uprooted on their own, I use out of my parnasa. So the Gemara says. So it appears from here, this is to support the Nachman. But Nachman says you are allowed to go ahead, benefit financially from a forbidden item when that benefit ultimately again results in the destruction of the item, even though you by definition want the continued existence of the forbidden item because you want to be the one who destroys it so you can get paid for it as opposed to being destroyed on its own. So there's a Savua, second line from the top 64. Savua Hamari, who's a baby, who's a baby, the Amar, and the kind of the Kilayim look very interesting. The Kiva holders in that general. Not only is there a prohibition to plant Kilayim, not only is there a prohibition to go ahead and facilitate the growth of Kilayim, but you can't even do anything that sustains them. So, for example, Rashi points out over here that let's say someone else planted a Kilayim, right? Up on the Kilayim, and the Hakam asks you to put up a fence around the Kilayim. The Akiva says, also, why? Because the act of putting up a fence, by definition, is part of the sustaining of Kilayim. Even though putting up the fence has nothing to do with the actual plant itself. Nevertheless, it is going to be also for the Akiva. Here we go. Nachish means weed. Kafa means covering the seeds with dirt. So look at you get off the spread because again that's because there you're actively or directly participating in the thriving of the Rabbi Kiva says Rabbi Kiva says even if you do anything to sustain the Kilayim, for example, put up the fence around the Kilayim, that's going to be problematic as well. So versus my time Rabbi Kiva, where's Rabbi Kiva get the Satcha Tizra Kilayim. Thus it says, do not plant Kilayim in your field. In the Elazaraya, I don't know the prohibition of planting. Mekayim. How do I know that I'm not even allowed to do something to sustain the actual growth itself, like even like putting up the fence? And the Lomar, low Kilayim. That's what they say. It's interesting over here. You are making a little bit of a play on words. So again, the Gemara is actually kind of slicing the house like low Kilayim. You can't do anything that ultimately, again, enables the existence of Kilayim, even if it's not directly involved with the actual plant itself, but just something that sustains it. That's going to be Asur as well. Ilu, Gemara says, the Ilu, the Ute Tifla Shari. But ultimately, interestingly enough, even according to the Kiva, the prohibition ultimately is doing something that sustains the Kilayim. What about if somebody's willing to pay me to uproot the Kilayim? So in Pashtos, it sounds like that is going to be totally interesting. The Gemara says, not necessarily. Well, it does have to be the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. Rather, Haman, whose opinion is this? Rabbanoni. It's the Rabbanon. Rabbanon, my area, open, I think it's Yumi and Mishapo. It's not true. According to the Rabbanon, if it's the Rabbanon, Rabbanon will hold to put up a fence, right? Because the Rabbanon only can be a Kiva. The Rabbanon will hold nothing you can do with plants to plant it or actively do something that facilitates the growth of the plant itself. So think of like supporting a putting up a fence they hold is mutter. So putting up a fence is mutter, and you can get paid for that. And certainly again you can get paid for uprooting the plant. So that's not going to be which the Gemara says, Achamas, this is very interesting. What's the case over here? The Ta'avid Bechina. Interesting. Where ultimately, again, I am uprooting the Kilayim for free. Yaakov asked me to do it, and I'm doing it for free. So that's the problem. Not just for the Amar, Liking Lahem Matnastimam Aser. Ultimately, that is of the opinion that Allah said you are not allowed to do a favor for him. Like we actually had this in the beginning of our name. On the floor as well. Those things I mean, compliment them, don't give them anything on them. He says, don't give on this thing, you can't for free. You can't do something for an outcome for free. If the free favor is destruction of the whole Zara, you still can't do it. So which the Gemara says, Mishmar Rabbi Akiva, la. The fact that you're saying this happening to Yehuda sounds like they're referring to Rabbi Akiva. So not be permitted. Yehuda Asra Likin and Masima. About when Yehuda Tifla Shakir. Versus no, I believe it says it's true. You can't do a favor, so to speak, give a free gift. You can't do a favor for him. But to do something to Abu Dhabi Zala, that's absolutely good. That's an objective benefit. I have, as a Rabbi Kiva Nami. I'm Rabbi Kiva. I'm Rabbi Kiva. I'm a kind Kilayim look, yeah? And it will take this law shepherd of it. You say something to Rabbi Kiva. Even though Rabbi Kiva has a more expansive, approach. Tradition of Kilayim. They're not only can you not plant it, not only can you not the actual planting itself, but you can't even put up a fence to sustain it. Even the Kiva would agree to uproot Kilayim to get rid of this year, to get rid of prohibited, is absolutely permitted, and you can get paid for that from the which the Gemara says, we soon know there is nothing else to go ahead and discuss about this. That's great. This phrase, this is like the Talmudic equivalent of like a mic drop. Sudomi, that's it, we're done. There's nothing more to discuss about this. So also, it's very interesting. So therefore, what this means is ultimately, now let's go full circle. How did we start with this? This all started by the case of an Akum wants to break his barrels of Yainesa. He asks me, he wants to hire me, a Jew, to go and break his going to pay me $50 a barrel. Okay, so I'm not allowed to do it or not. So remember, on one hand, you could say no, because therefore that means I want the continued existence of the Yainesa, and I'm benefiting from the Holy Zara. On the other hand, I'm destroying the Holy Zara. When Nachman said, do it, and Tava Allah. If it involves the destruction of a Zara, or for that matter, a prohibited item, even though, yes, I do want the continued existence of the Yainesa, I get it. I don't want it to break on its own. I want to break it. I don't want the Quran to be uprooted on its own. I want to uproot it. But nevertheless, I am permitted to go ahead and do these activities, get paid for them, and keep the proceeds, because the destruction of people, the destruction of Zara, the destruction of prohibition ultimately is a good thing. It says you get paid and Tavo Allah. Incredible. I must say, it really is such an interesting idea, because kind of like part of Western society, like live and let live. And that is important. As members of society, just the general approach to living in a greater society, we should take an approach to living. Yes, it's not your obligation to convince the world of your views and ideas, nor is it your place to stand in judgment of everyone else's lifestyle choices or everything else. Live and let live. That to a certain degree, that has to be our approach to living in a society. On the other hand, it's also teaching us this idea that evil shouldn't be allowed to take root in our world. And when there's something that is evil, it has to be uprooted. When there's something that is evil, it has to be broken. When there's something that is evil, it has to be smashed. It has to be destroyed. Because if you let evil take root, then it spreads, and unfortunately it becomes the norm. And sometimes then those lines between good and evil ultimately again become incredibly blurry. That's why the Matthew uses this lashon of yes, destroy the INS and cover Allah Rah. Because ridding the world of evil is a bracha. That is a bracha. It's not easy. It's not easy. And it's fraught with incredible challenges. We see this for what we think about such an incredible thing. If you think about what the nation of Israel, the state of Israel is doing, it's really unusual. And suddenly you would think that like the world would just line up, plus, right, just clap. Because we're doing the world's dirty work. And yet again, it's hard. Because often the world can't see what's evil, what's good, can't see who's right and who's wrong. But the Matthew tells us sometimes there is a little let live, and sometimes the Matthew says, Yishbar, Tamalakov. Sometimes you have to identify evil, you have to break it, you have to smash it, you have to destroy it, and once you do it, Tamalakov. Ultimately, the process is difficult, the process is brutal, the process is overwhelming. But ultimately, when you get to the other side of the process, that's where this world is. Incredible. Gemara goes like that. Good. Hadu Yasvi, so again, the same Kabbalah is singing. And the after Ugashin, yes, Hadu Yasvi, they come by like, the may have us become the other become not. So that's it. This is very interesting. What happens if an Atom sells his idol? So Atom sells his idol and he has now something for $1,000, $1,000. Does that money in the hands of the Atom take on the same identity as the Atom who sold it himself? No. Nitofes has done that the other way. Does it take on the identity, right? Does it take on the identity of the idolatry or not? So I'm going to run that thing. So it's very interesting. So ultimately, when the Matthew says, we start with the nail, let's come down, we go cover the top. So Matthew says, I think it's better. Sells his item, and he has that money does not contain idolatrous identity, but rather that money is just mundane wrong. This is the stuff. Here's what Matthew's proof. I know what the Asif made it out of. There were these people who came up with what happened. One of them, Zivu Zivino Pomad the Istafu, the Suez Scouts is fascinating. So that one's like this. These people came up with what happened. And they wanted to convert. Rabbi told them, guys, before you convert, here's what you need to do. Sell off all of your idolatry, right? Sell off all of your idolatry, and then you have the cash. After you do that, then convert. Now listen and watch this. What's over here? Rashi says over here, if you look at Rashi, if you have the Suez Skyru, what would this Skyru do? The unfinished Skyru, also link on all those go up, because remember, if they convert and they still own the idolatry, then that's idolatry owned by a Jew. Idolatry owned by a Jew, number one, can never be gay, right? Can never have its identity. They can't get annulled from it. So it tells them instead, before, while you're still Gentiles, sell it off. You have the money, then you can convert, and the money is permitted. What do you see from there? Obviously, it's permitted. Halacha Raisa, when he sells his idol, that cash is permitted. So the Gemara says, my time, no, we shouldn't become severed. Then they have others go home and the others come in the car. So that the proceeds of the sale of idolatry that are in the hands of the ultimately is permitted. I have to go and shiny person. Even that I can obey, bad I bought them. Maybe that case is different. Why is that different? Because since they're in the process of conversion, obviously they're negating the theological significance of the idol converting. So I'm going to be the battle is on the Zara. So maybe that's why the proceeds are. Eleni Alpha. Rabbi Gemara says, here's the proof. Yisrael Moshe Rabbi Rothschild. Not for avoid those problem that I lent $100,000. So what happened? So the uncle went and sold his idol, right? And brought me the proceeds from the sale. Or Yainess in the same case, I went ahead and I lent him $100,000. He sold his Yainess, and then he brought me the proceeds of the sale. What's that? Mutter. Ultimately, again, it's mutter. Interesting. The Gemara says, now, however, watch this. Something he actually Yainesa Vahilafa Asu. Let's say the actual same case, let's have $100,000. In a way here, I'm going to sell my oil. I got the proceeds. I'm going to sell my Yainesa Vahilafa Asu. In that case, it's Asu. So again, interesting. Case number one, same case. I lent $100,000. Case number one, he goes off, sells his idol, goes off, sells his Yainesa. I have no idea what he's doing. He brings me the proceeds, pays back the debt, move to case number two, same thing. I lent him $1,000. He says, I want to pay you back. Give me a couple of hours. I got to sell my idol. I got to sell my Nessa. When he comes back with the proceeds are prohibited. Effective Gemara, so what's the distinction? I don't say what's the distinction between these two cases. Sifa Mushum Bahamile Kirosa. So this is very interesting. So now this seems to circle back a little bit to the previous silver. But here's the difference. In the second case, where the outcome says, wait here while I sell my idol, or while I go ahead and sell my wine, I want the continued existence of the idol and the continued existence of the wine, right? Because I want to get paid. So because I want it, therefore Shesha's posits the proceeds of hustle. One second. If you don't say the kiyum of kiyagavim, that's what we just said before, but that's not. In other words, we'll say, when you want the continued existence of something, but I'm not doing anything to further the existence. So yes, of course, I want the continued existence of that idol until the apple sells it, because I want my money. I want the continued existence of the Yainessef because I want my money. But I'm not doing anything to facilitate the continued existence of these prohibited items. Why should it be us? Batinan, Garrett, this is the words, Batinan, Garrett, she Yarshu at the end of her clothes. Plus, it's very interesting place. You have two brothers. One converted, and one, they're both they're brothers. One converted and one is fallen. So brother Ger, brother Akum. So what happens? Their father died. Their Akum father died. Now they inherit their father. So they want to split the estate. In the estate is idolatry and Yainesa, and let's say permitted items. So Ger, Yokoloma, Locham, Aka, Logoshko, and Animals. So brother Ger can say to brother Akum, brother Akum, you take all the idolatry stuff, you take all the yain stuff, and I'll take the money and the nails. You can do that in Mishabot, and that's permitted. However, the Mishabot is just like us, obviously. All of this presupposes that the Ger has not yet actively taken possession of yain or items. Obviously, once that happens, there's no more recourse. Right? But well, there is recourse. You don't even see this. You could get to be the background of the Sarah, but it's much more complicated. Once a Jew already owns it, there are really very limited options. So as long as brother Ger has not yet taken possession of these items, no problem. There's no problem dividing up the estate. However, if brother Ger already took possession, then it's necessary. So ultimately, again, what do you see from here? Now in this case, brother Ger wants the continued existence of the idolatry of the Yayin, but he's not doing anything active to promote his continued existence, and therefore it's mutter. It's mutter. So what's the problem? What's the case over here in this Mishnah? This mission is talking about an idol that's made out of gold or silver, which means that what, even if it breaks, it's still valuable. So therefore, again, brother Ger doesn't actually care if it remains in its full state or not. Even if it breaks, who cares? It still has value. Which the Gemara says that's fine. That works fine for an idol. How would you explain the case then of value in itself? The Pharaoh's Hadron, so this is the Adriatic so apparently, Rashi points out that here, Adriatic person where ultimately it's very absorbent. So therefore, when you put wine in there, the earthenware absorbs wine to a degree that you can take a shard of that earthenware, put it in water, and reconstitute water. In that case, also, if water here doesn't, who cares if it casts, right? It doesn't make a difference because either way, the value is still retained. To which the Gemara said, the one saying, even if that's so, even if Brother Gail doesn't care about the fact that he didn't break, right? But he does care whether or not he gets stolen or lost, so he still wants to continue existence. You're bringing a raya, bring the piece in the case of the inheritance. Yer, no. Shani Rushas Ayer, Dakilu Baraba. Rabbis will make up by the Yerusha. In other words, normally the Gemara says perhaps this case should be problematic. But halacha l'maisa, Chazal will make up by the Yerusha. As long as the ger has not yet actively taken possession of the Yain or the idols, he is absolutely committed to work this out with his brother. Right? And so you take this, you take the prohibited stuff, I'll take the prohibited stuff. Even though, yes, he wants to continue existence. Why? Why would they make up by a ger? That people are going on, Zera Shemin Yatsu. We are afraid that if the ger has to make a choice between his money, his Yerusha, and his religion, he will choose his money and choose his inheritance. That's not enough on the ger. That's a reality of human nature. We've seen this before as well. For example, right? There's something called Chazal. Chazal said that in certain cases, theft, the thief doesn't always have to return that which he stole, right? And the victim should not accept back the stolen item. Why? In order to go ahead and facilitate the thief's truth. They're afraid if the thief has to return everything, they're not going to difficult for people to engage in self-sacrifice when it comes to financial matters. Right? Money is necessary. Money is important. And as much as we say, as long as you have your health, it's true. As long as you have your health and you can pay your bills. Right? Because if you don't have money, you just and many people do not stand up to religious challenges. There is a choice between religion and we're afraid that the ger, if he has to choose between halacha and ultimately again his Yerusha, he may be tempted to choose his Yerusha. Again, not because of the ger, because it's human nature. So therefore, Chazal didn't want to put him in that situation, therefore they would make him by a ger, and we're saying that often in this kind of case, you're going to have a state that is comprised of committed items and uncommitted items, therefore allow him to keep the committed items if his brother older than also 100 days. Tanya Rachi advice that supports this. Imagine when is this so? Shirshu, the case of Yusha, about Mishdak through us. In the case, let's say a business partnership with the also. So you see from here that Chazal allowed certain things to happen in the context of Yerusha that they would not have normally allowed to occur in other contexts as well, because you don't want to put the person in this, you don't want to put the ger in this precarious type of situation. Incredible. How do you guys apply this? Remember again, all of this is the same people who are sitting together. Another question that came up. Ger Tosha now she so let's say this is a very interesting case. Can a Ger Tosha go ahead and let's say just before we go just he said that Chazal will make it like that. Just so you understand the tremendous difference. Halacha is structured in a way to make us succeed. The Ribono Shel Olam wants us to succeed. And since we have a very sweet view of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a very sweet view of halacha, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waiting for us to mess up, so we can smack this down. It's already just mess up, so we can levy some type of punishment that we does. Let's take me forward from the truth. The Ribono Shel Olam wants our success more than we want our success. Chazal want our success more than we want our success. And all of the halachas, all of the all of the scriptures and all of the punishments are only there to put us on a path to success, not to smack us down when we go ahead and we make a mistake. But again, Ishmael understood what we need in order to be successful. Chazal understood what we need in order to be successful. And when they need to relax the standards to make us successful, they do it. It's incredible. They do it. When success is accomplished through relaxing of standards, Chazal begins with know that you have no greater advocate in this world than Ishmael. That's in this world than the next world. In this world, Chazal constantly aiming for successes. Okay, another question. Other yes will call about Ger Toshav, Moshe Babal's comes. What's a very interesting show? Can a Ger Toshav, go ahead and abolish or negate idolatry? Remember, an Akron has the ability to negate his idolatry, thereby decommissioning it from its status of theological significance. So a Ger Toshav, listener, what is a Ger Toshav? Now we're going to see there's not always about the definition of a Ger Toshav. Rashi points out here on the top of the daf, Ger Toshav, Eino Ovid Avodas Levin. Ultimately, again, he doesn't worship idolatry. But again, he's like an apple with everything else except he doesn't worship idolatry. Like he believes in Hakadosh Baruch Hu, he believes in God, he doesn't worship idolatry, but in every other respect, he's a non-Jew. So does such a person have the ability to decommission idolatry, to negate idolatry? The Gemara says, on one hand, we say only one who worships idolatry can decommission idolatry. Or maybe not, or we say like this, anyone who's what we call a barniyeh, if you're the parsha of an apple, then you can go ahead and decommission idolatry. And this guy is in the parsha, he's not Jewish. So because he's not Jewish, he's in the parsha of an apple. So because of that, even though Baruch Hashem, he himself doesn't worship idolatry, but he has the koach to go ahead and negate it. You know, so I'm going to do that for nothing. So I'm going to go start nothing. Instead of the koach, the battle will have well, nothing says no. Only someone who worships it can negate it. But someone who doesn't worship idolatry cannot negate idolatry. Therefore, the Ger Toshav doesn't have the ability to negate idolatry. This is a so went ahead and found idolatry in the marketplace. Going out to the marketplace, what's that? Actually, a boss in the so that's what I'm remember again. So let's say, listen to this case. I'm walking in the shop, I'm walking in the marketplace. I see a gold idol sitting there on the ground. If I lift it up, that's probably right because they haven't covered it. And once it's been acquired by a Jew, essentially it can't be decommissioned. So what do? Actually, so before I pick it up, I can pull over an apple, and then else effective. Let's pull over an apple and see if the apple is ugly. I need you to negate this idolatry, decommission it. Right? Theological decommissioning. So go ahead and engage in theological decommissioning of this idolatry. I know it becomes permitted. However, again, we should also the though. Ain't no only over the but again, once I pick it up, I take possession of it. At that point, we cannot be decommissioned. They should know only coven the battle of others for some shalom, the shalom. And every coven in Latin, the decommission is the Avodah Zarah or the Avodah Zarah of his friend, Bein of Da, Bein Shein. Whether he worships it or he doesn't worship it. Might of God and might be earth. What does it mean for word? What does it mean that whether he worships it or doesn't worship it? If you want to say that what we're talking about an offering, then Hainu Shalom Shafadeh, you already said it. You just said before that an offering has the ability to theologically decommission his Avodah Zarah and the Avodah Zarah of his friend. And a lot of the Ovid Kohanim, right? Ultimately, again, Ozda means an actual offering. What does it mean? A non-worshipper? Oh. So who is able to go ahead and decommission both an actual Ger Toshav Shmanilov, Ger Toshav Nanilov. What do you see from here? That a Ger Toshav has the ability to be Mutako, ultimately to theologically decommission Avodah Zarah. Incredible. Which the Gemara says, no. The older name of the Chal, he could be the only person. Not true. Rather, the Kukai will be the only person who could decommission Avodah as well as an actual idol worship of itself. I think the Kamrit, I knew Shalom Shafar. We already said that. And then the price is redundant because you already said that a Hakim could go out of definition is Avodah Zarah and his friend Avodah Zarah. The Gemara says, Reisha, listen to this. It's two different cases. Reisha, Zeh, Zeh L'Pa'ar, Zeh, Zeh L'Markos. Reisha is teaching you like this. If you have two Akims, right, and both worship Baal Pa'ar, or both worship Markos, so obviously, again, Akim 1 could negate his idol and his friend's idol, and Akim 2 could negate his idol and his friend's idol. Seifa, Zeh L'Pa'ar, Zeh L'Markos. Oh, the Seifa is teaching something different. Let's say one who worships Marthalis and one who worships Baal Pa'ar. What's the novelty over here? And after you can worship an idolatry even if he doesn't worship. So we'll say, so there are really few halachas being followed. Number one, an apple can negate his own idolatry. Good. Number two, an apple can negate his friend's idol if they worship the same idolatry. And halacha number three is an apple can negate his friend's idolatry even if he worships a different. Incredible, incredible. So the Gemara says, next, but again, no riot about a ger kosher. Right? So when it comes to a ger kosher, we still like the Rabbi Rothschild. Can a ger kosher, which is a Gentile, who repudiated idolatry, can he be without love? That is still an answer. Because basically, ger kosher, basically ger kosher. What's a ger kosher? Kosher kibbutz. So what's this? Now we're getting more definition. What is the definition of a ger kosher? So said Kosher Kiva Love with Kiva Fader, Shalom La'avon Avodas Meir says it's any apple who is accepted upon himself in front of three Chaver. You know, those are Chaver, you can just go right before Chaver. Saying is careful. If Shimon is careful about to make. So in this context, with Rashi, so it just means that you're in front of a base. Anytime the apple comes in front of a base, and he repudiates idolatry, that's a ger kosher. That's a ger kosher. Good. That's right there. Come say, kosher kibbutz Allah sheva mitzvos. So kosher kibbutz Allah sheva mitzvos shekibulem. Some say a ger kosher is any Gentile who has accepted upon himself the 7 Noah tribe. Don't see to acquire a base. That's a ger kosher. Shem mitzvos b'nei Noah. It makes it ger kosher. Even only not true. Him saying not true. Neither of these definitions satisfy the definition of ger kosher. What is a ger kosher? Amazing ger kosher. Ze ger ofen levelos shekibbutz Allah lekayim kol mitzvos hamuros b'Torah chutz me'isur levelos. So this is very interesting. What is the definition of a ger kosher? A ger kosher is someone ultimately again. It's not kosher, it's levelos, and he has accepted upon himself the rest of the mitzvahs. It's a pretty shocking definition. So let's say, really not bold is out there. The definition of a ger kosher. Rabbi Meir, he accepted upon himself in front of the lazy not worship idolatry. Chachamim, he accepted upon himself Shem Yisrael Noah. Achirim, he has accepted upon himself all of the mitzvahs except the laws of truth. He's Latin now kosher. Incredible, incredible. And the Raisa goes on. Yachad in Etzlo, Yain, Fafilu Be'er Shavu Yisrael. What's the Allah is? You can deposit wine with a ger kosher, right? You can leave it with him for a little bit of time. I should say deposit. You can leave with him wine for a short amount of time, but you can't deposit with him wine for a long amount of time. Now, what's the reason? What are we concerned about over here? What are we concerned about over here? We're concerned ultimately again that Rashi says, Rashi says over there, Yisrael Maniach Tefanusa Achiyilech even the Lokala, or no Gavanasa, the Mago of Asina on the base of Refash. Even the Eva and other Kahini for the Allah. You say, it's not a Lua like a Refash. So ultimately, you deposit wine with him for a short amount of time. Not for a longer amount of time, because they're saying that they swap out the juice wine for his own wine. Okay. And this is true even in a city where the majority of the inhabitants are Jews. You could leave with the wine for a short amount of time. Not for a long time. Again, we're not talking about Yain Nesa. We are not talking about Yain Nesa because he's repudiated idolatry. Right? But we are concerned that over time, for a longer amount of time, he may switch his mind from the truth. So for a short amount of time, it's mutter, for a long amount of time, passive. Shmano, kiyena. So the Gemara says, and his oil is like his wine. Now, what is that? Shmano, kiyena, and I felt shemen, mika, havi, yain. It's not what we want with this oil. Oil can't be into that. So, hello, yeno, kishmano. Interestingly enough, what it means is that this, when I saw that is that ultimately again his wine, his wine is like his oil, just like this is very interesting. And just like his oil is permitted, so to ultimately again is wine. Now look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi the Shmona B'ni Hamidiyayis Aliyeno Mutabana Shmona Kodesh Sheker Hashem Ma'afilatai Ava B'Shtia Asim. Now what does it mean that his oil is like excuse me, that his wine is like his oil? That the same way that you get enough from his oil, you can get enough from his wine. And you can't drink the wine of the Toshav, but ultimately you can get from the wine. The sharp hope dollar ultimately meant for every other thing. He is like he's like an apple. Which the rest of Shimon Omer Yeno Yayin Yes. Va'amilei Motor Mishkila. Shimon says his wine is like Yayin Nessa, but others say ultimately again that it is Motor ultimately again for consumption. So this actually falls over here. We'll pick up in the next section. Actually, let's finish. Let's finish this again. What do you see from here? With the shared part, we see from here that an apple is like Toshav is like an apple regarding every other matter. When my itself, ultimately, again, what does it mean when we say that a Toshav is like an apple for everything else? What does that mean? To which the Gemara says, love, the Mavata, Avodas Kochadim, Ka'avodas Kochadim. So doesn't that mean, because we're again, how did this whole thing back here Toshav get started? Got started was we tried to figure out, does he get Toshav have the equivalent gate idolatry? Does he actually decommission idolatry? So now we just got finished saying that in this respect, again, Toshav is unique, but in every other matter, he's like an apple. Doesn't that mean that just as an apple can theologically decommission from the gate that is all, so too can a get Toshav? So can a get Toshav? In which the Gemara says, no, no. Litin Rishus in the Lapa Rishus. No, actually, it means something else. It means actually Berkal Shabbos. What does it mean Berkal Shabbos? What's the rest? It's Give Samuel. Yisrael Miller, the Shamer Shabbos, what's that? It's just irrefutable. If you have multiple homes that open up into a courtyard, you cannot carry from a home into that courtyard without it. Right? Eruv essentially means we collect food from all of the inhabitants of the Chatzar. They join together, and that joint food makes it into the domain of one home. The home into the Chatzar, Chatzar to the home. And the halacha is if you have a Jew who did not join into the Chatzar, he can yield his rights. Let's say if Shabbos started, he forgot to participate in the Reuben forgot to participate in the Eruv, he can yield his rights to the other members of the Chatzar. If there is a non-Jewish resident, the halacha is you have to rent his rights. You cannot simply yield his rights, you have to rent his rights from him. So actually, the Gemara says, Yisrael Miller, the Shamer Shabbos of the Shop, without the Rishus. Ultimately, again, if you have Yisrael Miller, which unfortunately again is in Yisrael, to an apostate. So as long as externally it's not apostate, right? As long as externally, like right. Publicly keep Shabbos. Privately doesn't keep Shabbos. And at least publicly keep Shabbos. And what's the halacha? Without the Rishus, all you need to do if he didn't participate in the Eruv, he just needs to essentially yield his rights to someone else in the process. Okay. Shema Shabbos Shabbos of the Shul. In without the Rishus, but again, if you publicly violate Shabbos, then essentially it's like if he's like an apple, it's not enough for him to yield his rights and also to be rent. Rather, you have to rent his rights from him. Sha'anu, Yisrael, no sin rishos from without rishos. Right? Yisrael ultimately again has the ability to go ahead and yield his right, give up his rights, or give over his rights to the other residents. With the other to the Halim at Yisrael, but by ultimately you have to rent. You have to rent. So therefore, again, the Gemara is saying that when we say, so it wasn't just false finish on Ketzah, over the law, because how does the yield, for example, yield his right to give over his rights to the Order law, I hereby give over my rights. Right? I my rights in the Chatzar. Or Rishusi with or my rights are negated to you. Ultimately, it works for the purposes that Jewish residents acquire the rights of this non-participatory Jew to be participating in the rule. They talk this so just in general about Erev Chatzilos, again, you need the participation of all the Jewish residents. In general, if you have a Jewish resident who did not participate, even on Shabbos, he could build his rights, or he will not, or just simply negate his ownership rights in the Chatzar that allows everyone else to rely on the Chatzar. Even if he's a Yisrael ruler, as long as publicly he comes across as Jewish, ultimately, again, he could yield, or he could go ahead and by people, you have to go ahead and acquire his rights. And the Yisrael ruler who is publicly a ruler is treated like a therefore, when we said before that their culture ultimately again is treated like a for all other things, whatever things with a Ger Kosher. You are choosing the Chatzar want to make the zeros, they must be meant faithfulness, like the rights ultimately again of the Ger Kosher. Now, whether or not the Ger Kosher actually run the week of Sarah, the Eretz Yisrael said, you will see it tomorrow's daf. Shkaya everyone, not a daf. Let me hear experience such as for all of you. Wishing everyone say a great sponsorship to you to tell all of you this morning to begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share to thank our annual Common sponsors. So, dedicating all the German Russians this year as a Swiss from sales to us families. And Torah sponsors for the month of Av, Torah Stephen Levy Drazen in honor of their parents, Israel Drazen, Dina Drazen, and Rosenzweig in memory of Stanley Rosenzweig's and Rafa. Our week of learning sponsors, Dr. Anthony Wolf, promotion of the yard site of Dr. Wolf's father, Cyrus Wolf, Shalom, and then three versions of the Rafa, Nathan and Beth Adler in memory of their father, Ben Adler, Father Baruch Mordechai Ben Moreira Ross. One of the sponsors for today, Jerry Applebaum, memory of his beloved mother, Rosalind Applebaum, Rachel Bas, the Bahari, the United of our Talmud, all the missionary staff of Korea, their families in the family, all those who need their food, together, cold for the Israel culture. Baruch Hashem, Hashem, all of our hostages, Shalom and Bukharov, and our holy soldiers to be successful in following our Savior. And also with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Samach Daled 64. Incredible ground ahead of us today. We are picking up from Samach Gimel on the base 63b, and we are picking up 2, 4, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom. So Rav Nachman Ula Va'avini Bar So again, Rav Nachman Ula Avini Bar Papi Yasser Avifi Abar Ami Gabai. Avifi Abar Ami was sitting with them, and he was Yosef Mekabal Babai. He asked the following question. Listen to the fascinating question. Safra Lishbar B'Yayin Nesach. What is the halacha if an hires a Jew to smash barrels of yayin nesach? I say, okay, now I'm going to say, comes over to the bank. I'm going to pay $50 an hour. Do me a favor, smash these barrels of yayin nesach. Mahu, what is the halacha? Is the Jew allowed? I would say that's fake news. To accept to keep the wages in this world. So remember again, in yesterday's daf, we dealt with the concept of funds or income that is generated from what may or may not be permitted activity or dealing with items that themselves may be also valuable. Here, the uncle is asking me to do something with the INSF, but he's asking me to destroy the INSF. He's going to pay me for it. So am I allowed to keep those proceeds? Gemara says, "Oh, what's the halacha? Me, I'm here to keep the laws speaking about us." This is very interesting. On one hand, I want the existence of the INS. Why do I want the existence of the INS? Because if the barrels were to break on their own, I would lose the opportunity to break them and I lose the prognosis. So, on the other hand, interestingly enough, I want the existence of the INS. So because I want it, therefore, again, maybe that makes the closest word. But look at Rashi for just a moment. Miyamina Kiva, 3 lines up in the bottom of Rashi. Israel said, "Don't say the Kibbutz of Chavia said, Jew actually wants the existence of these barrels. Shalom Yishtabru Achsham Me'aleim. I don't know how to Ruben doesn't want them to break up. Rashi Shabru Ru, he does not us. So can you say that since the Jew actually wants, right? This is the thing to think about this, right? The Jew actually wants the Yain Nesach to remain in existence. I don't want it. I don't want it to break up. So therefore, maybe that's considered the closest to the INS. And therefore, again, it's hustle. On the other hand, this is the instruction of the INS, the instruction of the Torah. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. Sure, it wants to also make existence, but again, ultimately, the Israel of the Torah is the ultimately, again, should be fascinating. So Rahman says, Yishmar and Rahman says, no, take the job, Jew, take the job, get the money, and tell Allah you should be blessed. You have the opportunity to go and read out of Torah. That is a good thing. Take the money and go. So let's say it. Let's bring a proof to this. Ain't urgent in my big so let's say again, an apple plants July, right? July is for big things. So wheat, that's actually just 2 days ago. Wheat, and let's say, for example, wheat and grapevines. That's what I would have. It's a big mixture. So if an every company is planting July, the Jew can't go ahead and assist in the like home, you need to see something with gold. You can't do that. Top of Son of God, 64. About what could you not do the desert? What can I do? I can uproot, right? I can uproot that I am allowed to do the Rashi about the ring. Rashi from the Hebrew, but I felt like the words of the Kimosh, let's say players, let's say silver. To me, they very glad to play. But let's say again, he asks me to uproot it. I am allowed to do that even though they get paid for working with Kilai, right? And I want the existence of Kilai. Because if I'm saying uproot on my own, I would have to have so Kilai says. So the here from here, this is the support of nothing. But nothing says you are allowed to go ahead, benefit financially from a forbidden item when that benefit ultimately again results in destruction. Even though you by definition want the continued existence of the prohibited item because you want to be the one who destroys it so you can get paid for it as opposed to being destroyed yourself. So there's a Savua, second line from the top 64. Savua Hamari, who's a baby, he's ready to do it, and the kind of client that it's very interesting. They keep a hold to us in general. Not only is there a prohibition to plant killing, not only is there a prohibition to go ahead and facilitate the growth of killing, but you can't do anything that sustains them. So, for example, Rashi points out over here that let's say someone is planting a lion, right? Up against the lion, and the apple asks me to put up a fence around the lion. The Akiva says, also, why? The act of putting up a fence, by definition, is part of the sustaining of Kilai. Putting up the fence has nothing to do with the actual plant itself. Nevertheless, it is going to be also deciding. Here we go. Menachesh means eating. The fapa means covering the seeds with dirt. So menachesh on the fapa. Look at we get off this right because that is the book. So there your acts of doing directly participating in driving the point. We can keep it says up the train. And the keep it says even if you do anything to sustain the kilai. For example, put up the fence around the kilai, that's going to be problematic as well. Where's the keep Mastic says, do not plant kilai in your field. In the Elazarea, I don't know the prohibition of planting. The Kayim, I don't know that I'm not even allowed to do something to sustain the actual growth itself, like even like putting up the fence. Amalomar, gold kilai. I so let's say, so it's interesting over here. You are making some little bit of a play on words. A little bit of a play on words. So again, the guys actually kind of slicing it. I was like, "Lo kilai." You can't do anything that ultimately, again, enables the existence of kilai, even if it's not directly involved with the actual plant itself, which is something that sustains it. That's going to be asur kilai. Ilu, Gemara says, "Ve'ilu." But ultimately, interestingly enough, even according to the Akiva, right? According to the Akiva, the prohibition ultimately is being something that sustains the kilai. What about if somebody's going to pay me to uproot the kilai? So the Pashtos, it sounds like that is going to be totally interesting. Gemara says not necessarily. No, it doesn't have to be that mean. Rather, who's the thing? Is this Rabbanon? It's Rabbanon. Rabbanon might area open you mean any shepherd. No, it's not true. According to the Rabbanon, but this is Rabbanon. Rabbanon won't put a fence, right? Because Rabbanon only Rabbi Akiva. Rabbanon only you can do plants that are planted or actively do something that facilitates the growth of the plant itself. Some type of like supporting a plant or putting a fence to hold is mutter. So if putting up a fence is mutter, you get paid for that. But certainly again, you get paid for uprooting a plant. So I'm sure that's not going to be which the Gemara says, Hachamas, is very interesting. What's the piece over here? The Ha'avik B'china. Interesting. Where ultimately, again, I am uprooting the kilayim for free. Yaakov asked me to do it, and I'm doing it for free. So what's the problem? The Amar, Likin Lahem Mastinam Asr. Ultimately, Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that halacha ma'aser, you are not allowed to do a favor for him. Like he actually had this in the beginning of the time. Those Stefani. So I'm going to quote as well. Those Stefani. Covenant them, give them a you said, don't give us something you can't for free. You can't do something for helping for free. Even if the free favor is the structure of the Holy Zara, you still can't do it. So which the Lord says, Nishkol Rabbi Akiva, the fact that you're setting this up for Yehuda sounds like they're according to Rabbi Akiva. It's not permitted for Yehuda, Asra Likin Masima. Avalehute Tifla Shakir. Gemara says, no, according to Yehuda, Yehuda says it's true. You can't do a favor, so as to give a free gift. You can't do a favor for him. But to do something to Abuda Bazar, that's absolutely good. That's a good thing. That's an objective benefit. I have Rabbi Akiva Nami. I'm Rabbi Akiva. I'm Rabbi Akiva. I'm a kind of line book, yeah? Tifla Shakir. Say something to Rabbi Akiva. Even though Rabbi Akiva was a more expensive approach to the prohibition of kilai, they're not only can you not plant it, not only can you not see the actual planting itself, but you can't even put up a fence to sustain it. Even the Akiva would agree to uproot kilai, to get rid of Isser, to get everything prohibited, is absolutely permitted, and you can get paid for that from the which the Gemara says, the soon low there is nothing else to go ahead and discuss. That's good. This phrase of Sulamidi. This is like the Talmudic equivalent of like a mic drop. Sulomi. That's it. We're done. There's nothing more to discuss. So also, it's very interesting. Because therefore, what this means is, let's go full circle. How did we start with this? This all started by the case of an apple wants to break these barrels of Yayin. He asks you, he wants to hire you, a Jew, to go and break his way to pay me $50 a barrel. Great. So am I allowed to do it or not? So remember, on one hand, you could say no, because therefore that means you want to continue the existence of the Yahweh. Second, benefiting from the Holy Zara. On the other hand, I'm destroying the Holy Zara. But Nachman said, do it and cover Allah. If it involves the destruction of a Zara, or for that matter, a prohibited item, even though, yes, I do want to continue the existence of the INS, so I get it. I don't want it to break on its own. I want to break it. I don't want the plant to be uprooted on its own. I want to uproot it. But nevertheless, I am permitted to go ahead and do these activities, get paid for them, and keep the proceeds, because the destruction of people, the destruction of Zara, the destruction of prohibition ultimately is a good thing. So it says you get paid and Tavo Allah. Incredible. I will say there is it really is such an interesting idea because kind of like part of Western society mindset is like live and let live, and that is important as members of society. Just in general approach to living in a greater society, you should take an approach to living. Yes, not religion to be more is a good place to stand in judgment of everyone else's lifestyle choices or everything else. Live that to a certain degree that has to be our vocation for society. On the other hand, it's also teaching us this idea that evil shouldn't be allowed to take the root within our world. And when there's something that is evil, it has to be uprooted. When there's something that is evil, it has to be broken. When there's something that is evil, it has to be smashed. It has to be destroyed. Because if you let evil take root, then it spreads and unfortunately becomes the norm. And sometimes then those norms between good and evil ultimately again become incredibly burning. That's why the Rebbe uses this lesson of yes, destroy the Yain and cover Allah Rach. Because ridding the world of evil is a bracha. That is a bracha. It's not easy. It's not easy. And it's fraught with incredible challenges. We see this for what we think about such an incredible thing. But you think about what the nation of Israel, the state of Israel is doing. It's really evil. And suddenly you would think that like the world would just line up, applause, right? Just clap. Because we're doing the world's dirty work. And yet again, it's hard because often the world can't see what's evil, what's good, can't see who's right and who's wrong. But the Nachman tells us sometimes there is a little of live, and sometimes the Nachman says, Yishbar Tavallah. Sometimes you have to identify the evil, you have to break it, you have to smash it, you have to destroy it, and then if you do it, ultimately the process is difficult, the process is good, the process is overwhelming. But ultimately when you get to the other side of the process, that's when it's worth it. The Gemara goes like this. Hadu Yasvi, so again the same Chevra is sitting, and they ask about the question, whereas Hadu Yasvi, they come about like the may have us come out of the Chevra. So they'll say this is very interesting. What happens if an Akum sells his idol? So Akum sells his idol and he has now something for $1,000. He's got $1,000. Does that money in the hand of the Akum take on the same identity as the idol you sell it itself? No. Mitofes has done that the other way. Does it take on the identity, right? Does it take on the identity of the idolatry or not? So I'm doing nothing. So it's very interesting. So ultimately, I'm nothing. So I'm starting to nail this from the other way, but having the time. So nothing says I think it's mental. I think it's mental that if a person sells his item and he has that money does not retain idolatrous identity. But rather that money is just mundane money. Listen to this. So here's our next proof. Nitahano with the hustle of made the rabbi. Or when these people became a rabbi, what happened? Honorably, Zivu Hamad the Islafu, the suicide is fascinating. So that was like this. When these people became a rabbi, what happened? I see Rabbi and they wanted to convert. Rabbi told them, guys, before you convert, here's what you need to do. Sell off all of your idolatry, right? Sell off all of your idolatry, and then you have the cash. After you do that, then convert. That wasn't a watch list. Let's go over here. Rashi says over here, look at Rashi. Look at this guy. All of this guy, the African guy, also really call it for this because remember, if they convert and they still own the idolatry, then that's idolatry owned by a Jew. Idolatry owned by a Jew, number one, can never be gay, right? Can never have its identity. It can't get hanoah from it. So it tells them instead before, while you're still Gentiles, sell it off. You have the money, then you can convert and the money is permitted. What do you see from there? Obviously, you see from there that Allah sells his idol, that cash is permitted. So the Gemara says, my time, you shouldn't become sober, then you have let's go have a yellow unless you get the proceeds and sell the idolatry. But on the hands of the ultimately is permitted. I had the deal of shining us in the kingdom that I can delay, God I bought. Maybe that case is different. Why is that different? Because since they're in the process of conversion, obviously they're negating the theological significance of the idol converted. So Akum could be Mevanta his Avodah. Maybe that's why the proceeds are mental. Elami Rabbi Gemara says, here's the proof. Yisrael Shai Moshe Yavito Maya. Umachar Avodos Kofavim Behedi. I lent Akum $1,000. So what happened? So the Akum went and sold his item, right? And brought me the proceeds from the sale. Or Yain Nessa, the same case, I went ahead and I lent Akum $1,000. he sold his yayin nesach, and then he brought me the proceeds of this. What's that? Well, mutter. Ultimately, again, it's mutter. Okay, interesting. The Gemara says, now, however, watch this. Hunting let's go from yayin nesach ba'avilacha asim. Let's say the Akim same case, right? The Akim $1,000. Okay, so I pay you to me in Romania, I'm just going to sell my own. I am back at the proceeds. I'm going to sell my yayin nesach, I'll be back at the proceeds. In that case, it's custom. So you get interesting. Case number one, same case. I lend Akim $1,000. Case number one, he goes off, sells his item, goes off, sells his yayin nesach. I have no idea what he's doing. He brings me the proceeds, pays back the debt, move to case number two, same thing. I lent him $1,000. He says, "I want to pay you back. Give me a couple of hours. I got to sell my idol. I got to sell my yayin nesach." He comes back with the proceeds. The proceeds are prohibited. I exactly the amount of my shnaresh and my shnas. So what's the exemption? I want to say, what's the issue in these two cases? Rav Sefer Mushum Ba'amilek Kilot. So this is very serious. So now this seems to circle back a little bit from the previous sugya. Here's a difference. In the second case, the Akim says, wait here while I sell my idol, or while I go ahead and sell my wine. I want the continued existence of the idol, the continued existence of the wine, right? Because I want to get paid. So because I want it, therefore Sheshes posits the proceeds are awesome. One second. If you notice it, if you look at that's what we just said before, but that's what the Lord will say. When you want to continue existence, but I'm not doing anything to further the existence. So yes, of course, I want the continued existence of that idol until the Akim sells it because I want my money. I want the continued existence of the yayin nesach because I want my money. But I'm not doing anything to facilitate the continued existence of these prohibited items. Why should it be us? Vatinan, listen to this. Vatinan, Ger Avivachavim, Shiyarshu Avian Avivachavim. This is very interesting. You have two brothers. One converted, and one they're both brothers. One converted and one is not. So brother Ger, brother Achim. So what happens? Their father dies. Their father died. Now they inherit their father. So they're going to split the estate. In the estate is idolatry. Let's say prohibited items. So Ger Yochel Lo Ton Ata Lovas Bachamim Ba'animas. Ton Ata Yayin Esach Ba'anigelos. So brother Ger is saying to brother Achim, brother Achim, you take all the idolatry stuff. You take all the yayin esach, and I'll take the money and the minerals. If you do that, then Mishabalo, and that's proven. However, the Mishabalo Shusagir Asr. Obviously, all of this presupposes that the Ger has not yet actively taken possession of the yayin esach items. Obviously, once that happens, there's no more recourse. Right? But there is no seamless. You can get the background of the Sarah, but it's much more complicated. Once the Jew already owns it, there are really very limited conditions. So as long as brother Ger has not yet taken possession of these items, no problem. There's no problem dividing up the estate. However, if brother Ger already took possession, then it's possible. So ultimately, what do you see before? Now in this case, brother Ger wants the continued existence of the idolatry, of the yayin esach, but he's not doing anything active to promote his continued existence, and therefore it's mutter. So what's the problem? What's the case over here in this Mishnah? This Mishnah is talking about an idol that's made out of gold or silver. Even if it breaks, it's still valuable. So therefore, again, brother Ger doesn't actually care if it remains in its full state or not. Because even if it breaks, who cares? It still has value. Which the Gemara says that's fine. That works fine for an idol. How would you explain it to then yayin? The Pharis Hadran. So this is very interesting. Adrianic. So apparently, Rashi points out that here, Adrianic person where ultimately is very absorbent. Therefore, when you put wine in there, you also want to absorb to a degree that you can take a shard of that is in there, put it in the water, and reconstitute wine. In that case, also, brother here doesn't care as the thought. He has great thought. It doesn't make a difference. Either way, the value is still retained. Which the Gemara says, but one second, even if that's so, even if brother Ger doesn't care about the fact that he didn't break, right? But he does care whether or not he gets still washed, so he still wants a kind of continued existence. The Rushas Hager Kamat, don't bring a riot in this case. You're bringing a riot, bring the from the case of the inheritance of Hager. No, Shani Rushas Hager, the Kilo Bara. Rabbis will make them by the Yerusha. Whereas normally the Gemara says perhaps this case should be problematic. But halacha l'maisa, Chazal will make them by the Yerusha. And as long as the ger has not yet actively taken possession of the Yain Nesach or the idols, he's absolutely permitted to work this out with his brother people. Right? And so you take this, you take this, whatever this stuff, I'll take this stuff. Even though, yes, he wants to continue existence. Why? Why would they make him by a ger? That people are Zera Shemin Yatsu. They are afraid that if the ger has to make a choice between his money, his Yerusha, and his religion, he will choose his money and choose his religion. So that's not only not going to get. That's a reality of human nature. We've seen this before as well. For example, right? There's something called Chazal said that in certain cases of theft, the thief doesn't always have to return that which he stole. Right? The victim should not accept back the stolen item in order to go ahead and facilitate the thief's treatment. Right? If the thief has to return everything without difficult for people to engage in self-sacrifice when it comes to financial matters. Right? Money is necessary. Money is important. And as much as we say in our life, as long as you have your health, it's true. As long as you have your health, and you can pay your bills. Right? Because if you don't have money, you just things are like and many people do not stand up to religious challenges. There's a choice between religion and they're afraid that if he has to choose between halacha and ultimately again his Yerusha, he may be tempted to choose his Yerusha. Again, not because of again, because it's human nature. So if Chazal don't want to put in that situation, therefore they may go by it there, and you say that often in this kind of case, you're going to have a state that is comprised of permitted items and permitted items, therefore allow him to keep the permitted items, give his brother all of the other days. Tanya, Rachi writes that supports this. Imagine when is this so? Shir should in the case of Yerusha. About Mishtat Fuas. In the case, let's say the business partnership will be asked. So you see from here that Chazal allowed certain things to happen in the context of Yerusha that they would not have normally allowed to occur in other contexts as well. Because you don't want to put the person in this, you don't want to be there in this precarious type of situation. Incredible. Other Yosef kind of this. Remember again, all of this is the same group of Rabbanim sitting together. Another question that came up. Ger Tosha Mao Sheibata Avadas. So they'll say this is very interesting. Can a Ger Tosha go ahead and we'll say this idea that Chazal will make it by just so you understand the tremendous consequences of this. Halacha is structured in a way to make us succeed. That a Bono Shalom wants us to succeed. Sometimes people have a very skewed view of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a very skewed view of Halacha. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waiting for us to mess up so he could smack us down. He's all waiting for us to mess up so he could levy some type of punishment that he wants us. That's a pretty clear from the truth. But Moshe wants our success more than we want our success. Chazal wants our success more than we want our success. And all of the halachas, all of the rules, all of the strictures, and all of the punishments are only there to put us on a path to success, not to smack us down when we go ahead and we make a mistake. But again, Hashbach understood what we need in order to be successful. Chazal understood what we need in order to be successful. And when they need to relax the standards to make us successful, they do it. It's incredible. They do it. Once success is accomplished through relaxing of standards, that's all you as well. Know that you have no greater advocate than this world. That's this world than the next world. And in this world, Chazal constantly promoting for successes. Okay, another question. Other Yosef called about Ger Toshav, Moshe Batal is so it's very interesting. Can a Ger Toshav go ahead and abolish or negate idolatry? Remember again, an Akum has the ability to negate his idols as well, thereby decommissioning it from its status of theological significance. So So a ger toshav, what is a ger toshav? Now we're going to see this much more about the definition of a ger toshav. Rashi points out from the top of the daf, ger toshav, eino oved avodas. Ultimately, again, he doesn't worship idolatry. But again, he's like an apple in everything else, except he doesn't worship idolatry. Right? He believes in Hakadosh Baruch Hu. He believes in God. He does worship idolatry, but in every other respect, he's a non-Jew. So does such a person have the ability to decommission idolatry, to negate idolatry? The Gemara says, on one hand, the Padach Mevatel will Padach Mevatel. We say only one who worships idolatry can decommission idolatry. Or maybe not, or we say like this, anyone who's what we call a bar mineh, if you're in the parsha of an apple, then you can go ahead and decommission it. And this guy is in the parsha. He's not Jewish. He's not Jewish. So because he's not Jewish, he's in the parsha of an apple. So because of that, even though Baruch Hashem, he himself doesn't worship idolatry, but he has the koach to go ahead and negate it. You might say, I don't know who that is. So I'm going to also laugh because this tableau, the koach, the battle, the koach. So Nachman says, no, only someone who worships it can negate it. But someone who doesn't worship idolatry cannot negate idolatry. Therefore, the ger toshav doesn't have the ability to negate idolatry. So that's the base. Now, is a question. That's what's happening. Yisrael Shabbat, that's what Musha. So that's what it is. Yisrael went ahead and found idolatry in the marketplace. Idolatry in the marketplace, what's that about? Actually, so what's it saying? Remember again. So let's say, listen to this case. I'm walking in the shop, I'm walking in the marketplace. I see a gold item sitting there on the ground. If I lift it up, that's probably not right because they never covered it. And once it's been acquired by a Jew, essentially it can't be decommissioned. So what do I do? So before I take it out, I can call over an apple. Remember what's the attack is? Call over an apple. If you have an apple, energy to negate this idolatry, decommission it. Right? Theological decommission. So go ahead and engage in theological decommission of this idolatry. It's permitted. However, again, but again, if I take it out, if I take possession of it, at that point it cannot be decommissioned. To decommission his own avodah zarah or the avodah zarah of his friend, bein ovda, bein she'en ovda. Whether he worships it or he doesn't worship it. Well, we're going to find it this my ovda or my in ovda. What does it mean to worship? What does it mean that whether he worships it or doesn't worship it? If you want to say that what you're talking about is then Hayni Shalom Shachabim, we already said, we said before that Hakim has the ability to theologically decommission his avodah zarah and the avodah zarah of his friend. And a lot of the Oved Kohanim, in my a lot of the Oved Kohanim, right? Ultimately, again, Ovda means an actual offer. In my what does it mean? A non-worshipper? Oh. So who is able to go ahead and decommission both an actual Gertosha Shmanino, Gertosha Nanivaka. What do you see from here? That a Gertosha has the ability to be the Bakal, ultimately to theologically decommission Avodah Zarah. Incredible. Which the Lord says, no. The ultimate aim of God, rather, Kukai will be the only person who can decommission Avodah Zarah is an actual idol worship of itself. I did the covenant. I will shalom b'shafar. He said, already said that. Then the price is done. He's already said that. Decommission is avodah zarah and his friend avodah zarah. The Gemara says, Reisha is to this. Two different cases. Reisha zeh is zavapar, zeh is zavamarkos. Reisha is teaching like this. You have two options, right? And both worship Balakar. Or both worship Marcos. So obviously, again, Apple 1 can negate his idol and his friend's idol. And Apple 2 can negate his idol and his friend's idol. Seifa, Zela Ba'ar, Zela. Oh, the Seifa teaches something different. Seifa teaches different. Let's say you have one Apple who worships Marcos and one who worships Baal Ba'ar. What's the novelty over here? An Apple can worship an idolatry even if he doesn't worship. So let's say, so really two elements being told. Number one, an Apple can negate his own idolatry. Good. Number two, and asking him to negate his friend's idol if they worship the same idolatry. To negate his friend's idolatry, even if he worships a different thing. Incredible, incredible. So the Gemara says, but again, no raya about a ger kosher. Right? So when it comes to a ger kosher, we still like the Rabbi Rothschild. Can a ger kosher, which is a Gentile who repudiated idolatry, can he be made out of that was started with most basic was kosher, basic ger kosher. What's a ger kosher? Kosher kibbutz. So what's it? So now we're getting more definition. What is the definition of a ger kosher? Said kosher kibbutz that make you forbidden. Shalom la'avon avodas k'kavdim. There says it's any apple who is accepted by himself in front of three chavim. Chaver being just over chavim normally means somebody who's careful. If someone is careful about teeth. So in this context, with Hashem, so it just means he has to do it for a base. Anytime a apple comes in front of a base, a family from the chavim, and he repudiates idolatry, that's a ger kosher. Good. That's right there. Coming from saying, kosher kibbutz Allah sheva mitzvos. So kosher kibbutz Allah sheva mitzvos kibbutz. Some say a ger kosher is any Gentile who has accepted upon himself the 7 Noah 5. Those things are required days. That's a ger kosher. Shem is just very well. It makes a ger kosher. Even only able the bar ger kosher. Not true. Him saying neither of these definitions satisfy the definition of ger kosher. What is a ger kosher? Ger kosher. Zeh ger ofen levelos shekido alov v'kayim kol mitzvos hamuros katola chutz me'isser levelos. So this is very interesting. What is the definition of a ger kosher? The ger kosher is someone ultimately again who eats not kosher, eats levelos, but he has accepted upon himself the rest of the mitzvot. Shocking definition. What's that? Clear method is out there. Definition of ger kosher. Rabbi Meir, he accepted upon himself in terms of raising that portion of idolatry. Chachamim, he accepted upon himself Shem is the law. Chayrim, he has accepted upon himself all of the mitzvot except for all of the mitzvot. He's Latina. Incredible, incredible. But the Bible goes on. Yachad in Etzler, Yain, now, if you would be Ersha Ruby this time, what's the halacha is you put the positive wine with the ger kosher, right? You can leave it with him for a little bit of time. I should say you can leave with him wine for a short amount of time, but you can't deposit with him wine for a long amount of time. Now, what's the reason? What are we concerned about over here? What are we concerned about over here? We're concerned ultimately again that Rashi says Rabbi Rothschild is the wine. Rashi says over there, we saw Mariach Bechani, so actually left the so actually came over the Hakivan the Palach, the Lord of the Nasa, the Magori from Asuna on the base of the Hashivan. Ilo the Ilo I know about that, Ilo Mani from the Allah. He said, Ismail knew up like on the Hash. So ultimately, it wasn't going with him for sure amount of time. Not for a longer amount of time because we're concerned that they swap out the juice wine for his own wine. Okay. And this is true even in a city where the majority of the inhabitants are Jews. So as I said, Allah said the ger kosher, you could leave with him for a short amount of time, not for a long time, again, not to Yain Nesa, far enough to Yain Nesa, because this is repudiated idolatry. Right? But we are concerned that over time, for a longer amount of time, he may switch his wine for the Jews. So for a short amount of time, he's with her, for a long amount of time, Shmano Kiyema. So the Gemara says, and his oil is like his wine. What is that? Shmano Kiyema, like for Shemen, Nika, Honey, Yain. It's not both of the Yain with his oil. Oil kept me into Yain. Hello, Yeno Kishmano. Which is the more better what it means is that this, Allah for the Mesa, that ultimately again is his wine, his wine is like his oil, just like his oil is committed, so to ultimately again is his wine. I look at Ash for just a moment. Ash the Shmona we have guys and Yeno Mitzvah Shmona Kodu Shotu Hashem Ba'Kilo About the Shtia also. But what does it mean that his oil is like this? Excuse me, that his wine is like his oil? That the same way that you can get hana from his oil, you can get hana from his wine. You can't drink the wine that you get from and ultimately you can get hana from his wine. The shar of dollar, ultimately, that every other thing, he is like a, he is like a, he's like an apple. Shimon Omer, Yeno, Yayin, Nasa. Va'amilei mutar b'shkiya. Shimon says this wine is like yayin esach. Others say ultimately again that it is mutar, ultimately again for shkiya. So that's who calls up the other. We'll pick up on the answer. Actually, let's finish. Let's finish this again. What do you see from here? We shine part how we public. We see it from here that the things like this here Toshab is like an apple regarding every other matter. Ultimately, again, what does it mean when we say that it's patient? What is that? First, the Gemara says, love, then the Bata, Avodas Kofadim, Ki'avodas Kofadim. So doesn't that mean, because what's meaning again, how did this whole thing like Ger Toshab itself? Got started was we trying to figure out, doesn't Ger Toshab have the ability to negate idolatry, to theologically decommission idolatry? So now we just got finished saying that in this respect, Ger Toshab is unique, but in every other matter, he's like an doesn't that mean that just as an apple can theologically decommission and negate that whole Israel, so too can a Ger Toshab. So too can a Ger Toshab. To which the Gemara says, no, Litin Rishus Ulavato Rishus. No, it actually means something else. It means actually for Shabbos. What does it mean for Shabbos? What's it? It's Kidsanya. Yisrael Mulor, Yishamer Shabbos Rishus. That's it. Just quick. Eruv Chatzos. If you have multiple homes that open up into a courtyard, you cannot carry from a home into that courtyard without an eruv. Right? Eruv essentially means we collect food from all of the inhabitants of the Chatzor. They join together, and that joint food makes it into the domain of one home. When eruv means you carry from the home into the Chatzor, plus into the home. Now the halacha is if you have a Jew who did not join into the Chatzor, he can yield his rights. Let's say Shabbos started. He can yield his rights to the other members of the Chatzor. If there is a non-Jewish resident, the halacha is you have to rent his rights from him. You cannot simply yield his rights, you have to rent his rights from him. So watch this. The Gemara says, Yisrael Miller, Shana Shabbos of the Shot, Nevata Rishus. Ultimately, again, if you have Yisrael Miller, unfortunately, again, it's Yisrael to apostate. So as long as externally, he's not right? As long as externally, like right within, what would he keep Shabbos? Privately, he doesn't keep Shabbos. But at least publicly keep Shabbos. And what's the halacha? Nevata Rishus. All he needs to do is he didn't participate in the eruv, he just needs to essentially yield his rights to someone else in the Chatzor. She Nisharu Shabbos of the Shor, in Nevata Rishus, but again, if he publicly violates Shabbos, then essentially he's like an upbringing, then it is not enough for him to yield his rights in the Chatzor to the other residents. Rather, he has to rent his rights from Yisrael, no sin Rishus in the Rishus, right? Yisrael ultimately again has the ability to go ahead and yield his right, give up his rights, or give over his rights to the other residents. If the other Kohanim actually but ultimately you have to rent. You have to rent. So therefore again the Gemara is saying that when you say to us just false finish on Ketzad, overlook or say how does the Jewish, for example, yield his right to give over his rights to the overlook, we should see clearly. I hereby give over my rights. I give my rights to the Chatzor, or we should see the details, or my rights are negated to you. Ultimately, it works for the purposes of the residents acquire the rights of this non-participatory Jew to participate in the eruv. They start this just in general, about eruv potatoes. Again, you need the participation of all the Jewish residents. In general, if you have Jewish residents who did not participate, even on Shabbos, he can yield his rights, or he cannot, or just simply negate his ownership rights in the flushing out as everyone else to utilize the festival. Even if he's in Yisrael Mula, as long as publicly he comes across as Jewish, ultimately again he can yield but he could go ahead and by title, you have to go ahead and acquire his rights. And the strong woman who is publicly a woman is treated like a full circle. Those are careful. When we said before that their culture ultimately again is treated like a captive. For all other things means that if you live in a fusser with a their culture, and you the Jews in the fusser want to make it sinners, they must lend space, they must let the rights ultimately again of the their culture as well. Now whether or not the their culture is actually going to be the Sarah, and as Sharon said, you'll see it tomorrow's daf. Shpech, everyone, what a daf, what an incredible experience I just sustained all of you. Ocean, everyone.
Exciting stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Ryan G. Ebot is here. Every show is available at RyanGEbot.com. We have delicious Vito's Pizza from the great Charlie. Right before the show, check out Vito's Pizza. If you live anywhere near Southern California, it's the best pizza you can get around here. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been absolute months since we've had a guest on this show. And there is no one I would rather have. I can say with no ego. And what a lot of people, including myself, are saying the guest of the year of 2020, or perhaps the greatest guest we've ever had in the history of the show. The funniest,
this morning begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning cheer today. Our annual commentary special. Total Shachar dedicating every show of Brussels this year. This is Swiss from Sales Thomas from Israel. Commentary sponsors for the month of Av, Abba and Nicole, Stephen Randy Drazen in honor of their parents, Israel Drazen, Dina Drazen, Arun Rosenzweig, and member of Stanley Rosenzweig and the Rafa. Our week of learning sponsors, Dr. Andy Faith Wolf, promotion of the yard site of Dr. Wolf's father, Cyrus Wolf, Shalom, Ben, Speed versions of the Rafa, Nathan and Beth Adler, in memory of their father, Ben Adler, Robert Baruch Mordechai Ben Harina Ramos. One of the sponsors for today, Jerry Applebaum, member of his beloved mother, Rosalind Applebaum, Rachel Bas, the Baron. The American Alcohol Torah, all the Mishnah, South Korea, the families in the family, all those who need to share the credit, all the ladies, all the construction, the business, and all the passages, Shalom, and the Baruch, and our holy souls to be successful in all of that city. Unless with that, let us begin. Today's death is the son of God, 64. Really incredible down ahead of us. Today we are picking up from 7th Gimel on the base, 63b, and we are picking up 2, 4, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom. So Rav Nachman Ula Ba'adinu Garpap. So again, Rav Nachman Ula Ba'adinu Garpap is Yasser B'Tiyah Ba'ami Ba'bai. B'Tiyah Ba'ami is sitting with them. And the Gemara says, Yosef, the Kabbalah Ba'bai, he has the Khalif Hashem. This is very fascinating. Suffer Lishbar B'Yayin Nesach. What is the halacha if an Akum hires a Jew to smash barrels of yayin nesach? Right, so if you're having this Akum comes over to you and says, I'm going to pay you $50 an hour. Do me a favor, smash these barrels of yayin nesach. What is the halacha? Is the Jew allowed to receive and to accept the wages from his work? So remember again, in yesterday's daf we were dealing with the concept of funds or income that is generated from what may or may not be permitted activity or dealing with items that themselves may be usher by us. Here, the Akum is asking you to do something with Yayin Nesach, but he's asking you to destroy Yayin Nesach. He's going to pay me for it. So am I allowed to keep those proceeds? The Gemara says, no, what's the halacha? Me and me don't speak to the ushers. He's very interesting. On one hand, I want the existence of the INS. Now, why do I want the existence of the INS? Because the barrels are break on their own. I would lose the opportunity to break when I lose the barrels. So I want it, interestingly enough, I want the existence of the INS. So because I want it, therefore, maybe that makes the person's perfect. Look at Rashi just for a moment. We have been on Kriva, we don't have the bottom of Rashi. Israel said, what's the big deal? Somebody else said, you actually want the existence of these barrels. So I don't know, Ruben doesn't want him to break on their own. Actually, Shabaru, he does for us. So can we say that since the Jew actually wants, right? You think about it this way, right? The Jew actually wants the Yayin Nesach to remain in existence. I don't want it to break on its own. So therefore, maybe that's considered to be proceeds from Yayin Nesach. Therefore, again, it's us. On the other hand, this is the destruction of the INS and destruction of other Mizrah. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. Sure, I want Gauss to remain in existence. Again, ultimately, to destroy all Mizrah is a good thing, and therefore the proceeds, ultimately, again, should be fascinating challenge. So Nachman says, Yishbar and Nachman says, no, take the job, Jew, take the job, get the money, and tell Bracha you should be blessed. Because you have the opportunity to go and root out of Zara. That is a good thing. Take the money and go. So the rest of the say, so let's say again, wheat, we had such as 2 years ago. Wheat and let's say, for example, wheat and grapevine. That's the how we get it. It's a big mixture. So if an Obed Kohanim is planting Torahim, the Jew can't go ahead and assist him in the planting. Is like Poland, the sea covering the third. You can't do that. How about son of father? 64. What can I do? I can uproot, right? I can uproot him. Then I am allowed to do the Rashi about Ogrin Lash Tifon with people Va'afon of the loads of the Kimoshly Akumelin Ashar. Let's say he hires me and it's silver. To me, if they've already planted for like that, I can't but let's say again, he asks me to uproot it. I am allowed to do that even though I'm going to get paid for working with Kilayim, right? And I want the existence of Kilayim because if the clients want to uproot it on their own, I lose out on my muscle. So you know what it says. So it appears from here, this is to support the Mach. The Mach says you are allowed to go ahead and benefit financially from a forbidden item when that benefit ultimately again results in the destruction of the item, even though you by definition want the continued existence of the prohibited item because you want to be the one who destroys it so you get paid for it as if it was destroyed itself. So there's a Savua, second one from the top 64. Savua Hamari, who's a baby, it's Rabbi Akiva, it's Rabbi Akiva Bamar, and the kind of the Kilayim brings, Rabbi Akiva holds in general. Not only is there a prohibition to plant, not only is there a prohibition to go ahead and facilitate growth of planting, but you can't do anything that sustains that. So, for example, Rashi points out over here that let's say someone else plants the Kilayim, right? After planting the Kilayim, and the Apple asks me to put up a fence around the Kilayim. Rabbi Akiva says, awesome. Why? Because the act of putting up a fence, by definition, is part of the sustaining action. The putting up the fence has nothing to do with the actual plant itself. Nevertheless, it is going to be also decided. There you go. And Nefesh means eating. The Kata means covering the seeds of the corn. So Nefesh was probably I look at you get my respect because again, let's take a look. They actively or directly participating in the driving of home. Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi Akiva says, anything to sustain it. For example, put up the fence around the Kilayim, that's going to be problematic as well. So once we might have Rabbi Akiva, this will be key. Sub-Farmer Israel Kilayim. It says, do not plant Kilayim in the field. I only know the prohibition of planting. The Kilayim, I don't want to go, but I'm not even allowed to do something to sustain the actual growth itself, like even like putting up the plants. Lomar, Vol Kilayim. So let's say, so it's interesting that the Gemara is making this a little bit of a play on words. A little bit of a play on words. So again, the Gemara is actually kind of slicing the house like Vol Kilayim. You can't do anything that ultimately, again, enables the existence of Kilayim, even if it's not directly involved with the actual plant itself, which is something that sustains it, that's going to be possible. Gemara says, the Ilum, the new Tifla Shari. But ultimately, interestingly enough, even if we're going to keep that, I need to keep up the prohibition ultimately, which then sustains the Kilayim. What about if somebody's going to maybe to uproot the Kilayim? So in Hashkos, it sounds like that is going to be totally interesting. Gemara says, not necessarily. Well, that's not be the idea of Rabbi Akiva. Rather, who's the thing? Is this Rabbanoni? Is it Rabbanoni? Rabbanon, my area, Osrin, Afilu, Yumi, Nami, Shatzah. Yeah, but it's not true. According to Rabbanon, this is Rabbanon. Rabbanon even holds the offense, right? Because Rabbanon, only can be a kiva. Rabbanon holds that you can be planted or actively do something that facilitates the growth of the plant itself. Some type of like supporting a plant or putting a fence that holds is mutter. So putting up a fence is mutter. You get paid for that, but certainly again you can get paid for uprooting the plants. I'm saying that's not going to be to which the Gemara says, Afamaskina is very interesting. What's the case over here? The Ka'avit Bechina. Interesting. Where ultimately, again, I am uprooting the Kilayim for free. Yaakov asked me to do it, and I'm doing it for free. So what's the problem? Ultimately, Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that Allah Almighty, you are not allowed to do a favor for him. Like we actually had this in the beginning of our so I love Stephanie. So all my hope is what most Stephanie doesn't need it says, don't give up something you can't for free. You can't do something for an outcome for free. Even if the free favor is instruction of Allah, you still can't do it. So which the says, Rabbi Yehuda, Mishmal Rabbi Akiva, La. The fact that you're saying this up to Rabbi Yehuda sounds like they're going to Rabbi Akiva. It's not permitted. Rabbi Yehuda, Asher Likin Nasila. About the Yehuda, Tifla, Shakir. Versus according to Yehuda, and Yehuda says it's true. You can't do a favor, so to give a free gift. You can't do a favor for him. You have to do something to hold up over Zara. That's absolutely correct. That's a good thing. That's an objective benefit. I agree as already. Even Nami. I'm Rabbi Akiva. I'm Rabbi Akiva. I'm a kind of line with that, yeah? You take this law, Shakir. You say something according to Rabbi Akiva. Even though Rabbi Akiva was a more expansive, approach to the prohibition of July, they're not doing Kinat planting. That's only Kinat saying the actual planting itself. You can put up a fence to sustain it. Even the Kiva would agree to uproot July to get rid of this syrup to get rid of prohibited is absolutely permitted, and you can get paid for that from the which the Gemara says, the soon there is nothing else to go ahead of this. It's good. This is crazy. This is like the Talmudic equivalent of like a knife job. Pseudo-meat. That's it. We're done. There's nothing more to discuss. So also, it's very interesting. Therefore, what this means is, now let's go for a circle. How did we start with this? This all started by the case of an uncle wants to break his barrels of yain. He asks me, he wants to hire you, a Jew, to go and break. He's going to pay me $50 a barrel. Great. So am I allowed to do it or not? So remember, on one hand, you could say no, because therefore that means I want the existence of the yain. Benefiting from the whole side. And destroying the whole side. But Nachman said, do it and cover Allah. If it involves the destruction of the Zara, or for that matter, a prohibited item, even though, yes, I do want the continued existence of the INS, so I get it. I don't want it to break on its own. I want to break it. I don't want the plan to be uprooted on its own. I want to uproot it. But nevertheless, I am permitted to go ahead and do these activities, get paid for them, keep the proceeds, because the destruction of the destruction of Zara, the destruction of prohibition ultimately is a good thing. And so that says you get paid and cover Allah. Incredible. I will say it really is such an interesting idea of kind of a part of Western society mindset is live or not live. And that is important as members of society, just the general approach to living in a great society. We should take an approach to living. Yes, it's not that illusion to it's the world of living. Where is it yet? Where is the place to stand in judgment of everyone else's lifestyle choices or everything else? Live. And that's to a certain degree, that has to be our approach to living society. On the other hand, it's also teaching us this idea that evil shouldn't be allowed to take root within our world. And when there's something that is evil, it has to be uprooted. When there's something that is evil, it has to be broken. When there's something that is evil, it has to be smashed. It has to be destroyed. Because if you let evil take root, then it spreads, and unfortunately it becomes the norm. And sometimes then those lines will ultimately again become incredibly boring. That's why the Rebbe uses this question of, yes, destroy the INS and cover Allah. Because ridding the world of evil is a blessing. That is a blessing. It's not easy. It's not easy. And it's fraught with incredible challenges. We see this for what think about, especially how it looks good. As you think about what the nation of Israel, the state of Israel is doing. It's really illegal. And sometimes you think that like the world you're just ignoring a false righteous flag. Because we're doing what we're doing, you know, it's dirty. And yet, again, it's hard. Because often the world can't see what's evil, what's good, can't see who's right, who's wrong. But the Matthew tells us that sometimes there is a little good, and sometimes the Matthew says, Yishkar, sometimes you have to identify evil, you have to break it, you have to smash it, you have to destroy it, and if you do it, ultimately the process is difficult, the process is brutal, the process is overwhelming. But ultimately when you get to the other side of the process, that's what it's for. More goes like that. The Gemara goes like that. But Chavi Yasvi, so again, the same Chavi is sitting. And they ask Rabbi Rothschild, was Chavi Yasvi becoming by like, they have this Chavi Yasvi. So that's like, this is very interesting. What happens if an Apple sells his item? So Apple sells his item and he has now sold for $4,000. Does that money in the end of the Apple take on the same identity as the Apple he sold? Says does it take on the identity, right? Does it take on the identity of the idolatry or not? So I'm going to do it on. So it's very interesting. So ultimately, that would is from the tongue. So nothing says I think it's water. I think it's water. That is an apple sauce is idol. And he has that money. That money does not retain idolatrous identity. But rather that money is just one day. Listen to this. Right? Here's our left. I know the hustle made the rabbi. These people who came up with rabbi. However, Zilu Kabad the Islam, the Suez guys is fascinating. So that's like this. There were these people who came up with rabbi. And what happened? I see rabbi. And they wanted to convert. Rabbi told them, guys, before you convert, here's what you need to do. Sell off all of your idolatry, right? Sell off all of your idolatry, and then you have the cash. After you do that, then convert. The rest of their watch this. What's the answer here? Rashi says over here, look at Rashi, look at the Suez guy. One of these guys, the African guy, will also leave off on all this fell. Because remember, if they convert and still own the idolatry, then that's idolatry owned by a Jew. Idolatry owned by a Jew, number one, can never be gained. Right? Can never have its identity. They can't get enough. So he tells them instead, before, while you're still Gentiles, sell it off. You have the money, then you can convert when the money is committed. What do you see from there? Obviously, you see from there that Halacha when seller sells his idol, that cash is committed. So the Gemara says, my time, you shouldn't become severed, then they have a list of other guys that become the proceeds of the sale of idolatry. Hands of the is committed. I had to go and shine us in the table that I could pay, God I bought them. Maybe that case since the process of conversion, obviously they're negating the theological significance of the burden. So how can we believe that that is a result? Maybe that's why the process of Elemi Rabbi Gemara says, here's the proof. The social emotion of people come. Those go from the I lent $1,000. So what happened? So the uncle went and sold his house. Right? And brought me the proceeds from the sale. Or Yaines in the same case, I went ahead and I lent him $1,000. He sold his Yaines, and then he brought me the proceeds of the sale. What's that? Mutter. Ultimately, again, is mutter. Okay, interesting. The Gemara says, now, however, watch this. One thing we actually can call, let's go find Bahilah. Yaines and Bahilah, let's say the same case, $1,000. He's still already paying me in Romania. I'm going to sell my own. I only got with the proceeds. I'm going to sell my Yaines and got with the proceeds. That case is possible. So, interesting. Case number one, same case. I lent Uncle $1,000. Case number one, he goes off, sells his item, goes off, sells his guy, and I said, I have no idea what he's doing. He brings me the proceeds, pays back the debt. Case number two, same thing, I lent $1,000. He says, I want to pay you back. Give me a couple of odds. I gotta sell my idol. I gotta sell my Nessa. The proceeds are prohibited. My directly below my generation mentions. So what's the section? I don't say what's this in these two cases. Safe from usually the other than creative. So this is getting so now this seems to circle back a little bit to the previous signal. Now here's a good one. Second case, where the operator says, wait here while I sell my item, or while I go ahead and sell my wine. I want the continued existence of it. I don't want the continued existence of the wine, right? Because I want to get paid. So because I want it, therefore Sheshes posits the proceeds for us. What's that? If he wrote to the human Kiagamin, that's what we just said before, but that's what said. When you want the continued existence of something, and I'm not doing anything to further the existence. So yes, of course, I want the continued existence of that idol until the Abbot says because I want money. I want the continued existence of the INSF because I want my money. But I'm not doing anything to facilitate the continued existence of these items. Why should it be us? Continent, there is this contract, there are she your shoe and the other supposed to be very interesting. You have two brothers. Two brothers. They were both Achman brothers. One converted and one still So brother Ger, brother Achman. So what happened? Their father died. So their father, their Achman father died. You know, they inherit their father. So they don't speak to the estate. In the estate, there's idolatry in the Ayyasef. And let's say permitted idols. So Ger left the Roma, no Shem Achman, Roma's family, and goes. So Atu Yainasef, so brother Ger, the estate of brother Achman, so brother Achman, you take all the idolatry stuff, you take all the Yainasef, you take the money and what else. You can do that. The Mishabah, and that's permitted. However, the Mishabah is just like yours. All of these presupposes that the Ger has not yet actively taken possession of the Yainasef items. Obviously, once that happens, there's no more recourse. Like, well, there is seems you get upwards to the and it's much more complicated. Once the Jew only owns it, that very little. So as long as brother Ger has not yet taken possession of his items, no problem. There's no point in dividing up the estate. However, if brother Ger already took possession, then it's possible. So what's this? What do you see? Now in this case, brother Ger wants the continued existence of the idolatry of the Yahushua. But he's not doing anything active to promote his continued existence. And therefore, it's mutter. So what's the problem? Rabba Barula Masisa Maholos becomes Halak Mishkala. That's the case over in this Mishnah. This Mishnah is talking about an idol that's made of gold or silver. Even if the break is still valid. So therefore, again, brother Ger doesn't actually care if it remains in its whole state or not. Even if it breaks, who cares? It still has value. That's fine. That works fine for an idol. How would you explain the case then of Yayin? The Pharaoh's Hadron. So what's his name? Adrianic person. So apparently, each Rashi points out that here is Adrianic person or ultimately it's very absorbent. So therefore, you put wine in there, the person that absorbent but you could take a shard of that everywhere, put it in the water, and reconstitute that. In that case, also, brother Ger doesn't care it's the fact. Doesn't make a difference because either way, the value is still the same. Even if that's so, even if brother Ger doesn't care about the fact that it breaks, like he does care whether or not it's still lost, so it's still there, so that continued existence. Papa, don't bring a riot to this case. We're bringing a riot in the case of the inheritance from Ger. No, Shani Yerusha Sager, Dakilu Barak. Rabbis were made by the Yerusha. Normally, the Gemara says perhaps this case should be problematic. But halacha l'maisa, Chazal were made by the Yerusha. as long as the Ger has not yet actively taken possession of the Yesef or the idols, he's absolutely committed to work this out with these brother people. Right? And so you take this, you take whatever this stuff, I'll take whatever this stuff. Even though, yes, he wants to continue existence. Why? Why would they make it by a Ger? That people are on Zera Shemin Yatsu. They are afraid that if the Ger has to make a choice between his money, his Yerusha, and his religion, he will choose his money and choose his religion. So that's not a knock on the Ger. That's the reality of human nature. We've seen this before as well. For example, right? There's something called compulsion. Chazal said that in certain cases, theft, the thief doesn't always have to return that which he stole. Right? The victim should not accept that the stolen item right in order to go ahead and facilitate the thief's truth. We're afraid if the thief has to return everything, we're not going to it's difficult for people to engage in self-sacrifice when it comes to financial things. Money is necessary. Money is important. And as much as we say, as long as you have your health, sure. As long as you have your health, and you can pay your bills. Right? Because if you don't have money, just things are likely to be hard. And many people do not stand up to religious challenges. So there's a choice between religion and we're afraid to stop the Ger. He has to choose between both. And ultimately, again, his Yerusha, he may be tempted to choose his Yerusha. Again, not because of the Ger, because it's human nature. Therefore, Chazal didn't want him in that situation. Therefore, they would make us by a Ger. Understand that often in this kind of case, you're going to have an estate that is comprised of forbidden items. Therefore, allow him to keep the permitted items if his brother all of the forbidden. What's that any place? Tanya, Rachel writes that supports this. What is this? So, Shirshu, the piece of Yerusha, about Mishpat to Asher. But in the case, let's say a business partnership with the Asher. So you see from here that Chazal allowed certain things to happen in the context of Yerusha that they would not have normally allowed to occur in other contexts as well. We don't want to put the person in this way, in this precarious type of situation. Incredible. Other Yosef remember again, all this is just same people Rabbanim sitting together. Another question that you Ger Tosha now she got for Avodas Hashem. So they'll say this is a very interesting place. Can a Ger Tosha go ahead and we'll say just before you go on, you say keep the Chazal when they go by the Ger. Just so you understand the tremendous misunderstanding. Halacha is structured in a way to make us succeed. That a ownership owner wants us to succeed. Simply to become a very skewed view of a very skewed view of Halacha. That is waiting for us to mess up, so you can smell this stuff. I'll wait for us to mess up, so you can let me start over the punishment of the reasons. Let's agree to the truth. The emotion wants our success more than we want our success. Chazal wants our success more than we want our success. But look at the halachas, the religious leaders, all these scriptures, and all the punishments are only there to put us on a path to success, not to smack us down when we go ahead and make a mistake. But again, Sharp understood what we need in order to be successful. Chazal understood what we need in order to be successful. And when they need to relax the standards to make us successful, they do it. They do it. When success is accomplished through the lacking of standards, that's all people no greater opportunities for punishment. That's in this world and in the next world. In this world, Chazal, that's the people who live for success. Okay, another question. How do you guys recall about it? Ger Tosha, Marshe Batal's this very interesting. Can a Ger Tosha go ahead and abolish or negate idolatry? Remember, has the ability to negate these items, thereby decommissioning it from its status of theological significance. So a Ger Tosha, we don't say, well, what is a Ger Tosha? So we're going to say, what is the definition of a Ger Tosha? Now she points out the very top of the daf, Ger Tosha, Eino Ovid Avodas Hashem. Ultimately, again, he doesn't worship idolatry. But again, he's like a everything else, except he doesn't worship idolatry. Like, he believes in Hakadosh Baruch Hu. He believes in God. He does worship idolatry. But in every other respect, he's a non-Jew. So does such a person have the ability to decommission idolatry, to negate idolatry. Somewhere it says, on one hand, he's saying only one who worships idolatry can decommission idolatry. Or we say like this, anyone who's going to kill a barmineh, if they're the parsha of an apple, then you can go ahead and decommission. And this guy is in the parsha, it's not Jewish. It's not Jewish. So because he's not Jewish, he's in the parsha of an apple. So because of that, even though Baruch Hashem, he himself doesn't worship idolatry, and he has the cloth to go ahead and negate it. I'm going to go with that. So there was also a math this stands out the color of the battle war color. And actually says that only someone who worships it can be doing it. But someone who doesn't worship idolatry cannot be doing idolatry. Therefore, the Ger Kosher doesn't have the ability to negate idolatry. This is a basic question. So went ahead and found idolatry in the marketplace. What's that about? Actual Boston. So what's it saying? I remember again. So let's say, God, listen to this case. I'm walking in the ship, I'm walking in the market. I see a big idol sitting there on the ship. If I lift it up, that's probably right, because they not required by it to essentially can't be used. So what do? Actually, Boston. So before I pick it up, over the I can pull over an apple, and then else you pack it. Pull over an apple, and it says the apple, anything to negate this decommission. Right? Theological decommission. So go ahead and engage with theological decommission of this book. I don't think it's permitted. However, again, in the Shabbos Aliyogo, ain't no only other but again, but if I pick it up, I take possession of it, and that's when you cannot repeat decommission. In Shabbos, only for Kavim Levanta Avodas for Kavim Shalom, Shachavim. Only for Kavim Lakum, the decommission is Kavim Avodah Zarah, or the Avodah Zarah of his friend, they of God, they She'im God. Whether he worships it or he doesn't worship it. My of God or my of what does it mean? What does it mean that whether he worships it or doesn't worship it? If you want to say that properly, then Haynu Shalom Shafar, we already said that. We said before that it happened, has the ability to theologically decommission his Avodah Zarah, and the Avodah Zarah as his friend. And the love of the Oved Kohanim, a love of the Oved Kohanim, right? Ultimately, again, of the means natural effort. My shit in life, what does it mean? A non-worshipper, oh. So he was able to go ahead and decommission both an actual effort and a Gertosha, which none know, Gertosha none about. I want to see here that a Gertosha has the ability to give a battle ultimately to theological decommission of our desire. Incredible. This verse says, no. The only name of God, rather, I will be the only person who decommission of the desire as an actual idol worship. I have just found it, and you shall know the shuffle. We said already said that. Then the price is we've done. We already said that we've got a decommission. Is that what we've done? And it's very good. Even though it says, Reisha, listen to this. Two different cases. Reisha, Zed, the Zed of the heart, the Zed of the marketplace. Reisha is teaching you like this. You have two options, right? And both worship Baal, or both worship marketplace. Obviously, again, Atom 1 can negate his idol and his friend's idol. And Atom 2 can negate his idol and his friend's idol. Seifa, Zela Baal, Zela. Oh, the Seifa is teaching something different. Let's see one who worships Marcos and one who worships Baal Ha'ar. What's the novelty over here? And worship an idolatry he doesn't worship. So this is so there will be three elements in the title. Number one, you negate his own idolatry. Good. Number two, an athlete can negate his friend's idol if they worship the same idolatry. Halacha number three is an athlete can negate his friend's idolatry even if he worships a different. Incredible. Incredible. So the Gemara says, but again, no raya got a Ger Kosher. Right? So when it comes to a Ger Kosher, we still have to go to and a Ger Kosher, which is a Gentile, who is repudiated idolatry, is repudiated by idolatry, and he live out the other. That is the evidence. What's a ger kosher? Kosher kibbutz also does it. So now we're getting more definition. What is the definition of a ger kosher? So instead, kosher kibbutz definition of kibbutz. Shalom la'avon avodas v'cham. Says it's any apple who is accepted upon itself in front of three chaver. What's that? Chaver being stabilized before. Chaver normally means somebody who's careful. Which is somebody who's careful about it. So in this context, the Pasha said it just means that you're in a base. Anytime an apple comes in front of a base, and he repudiates idolatry, that's a ger kosher. That's a ger kosher. Good. That's right there. Come say, kosher kibbutz alav sheba mitzvos kibbein. So kosher kibbutz alav sheba mitzvos kibbein. Some say, and the ger kosher is any Gentile who has accepted upon himself the 7 Noah had. Don't see to acquire a base. That's the ger kosher. Sheba mitzvos kibbein. Well, the nation is not ger kosher. Even only able to follow the ger kosher. Natural. Isn't saying natural offending. Neither of these definitions satisfy the definition of ger kosher. What is a ger kosher? And the reason ger kosher Zeh ger ofen levelos shekibbel alav lekayim kol mitzvos hamuras b'Torah chutz me'isur levelos. So this is very interesting. What is the definition of the ger kosher? The ger kosher is someone ultimately again who eats not kosher, eats the levelos, but he has accepted upon himself the rest of the mitzvahs to the Torah. It's pretty shocking definition. So it's like really not the definition of ger kosher. Rabbi Meir, he accepted upon himself in front of the base of idolatry. Zafalin, he accepted upon himself Shem's Torah. Chayrim, he has accepted upon himself all of the mitzvos except for those kosher. He's allowed to eat non-kosher. Incredible. But the Brisa goes on. Yachad in Etzlo, Yain, Ba'afidu bi'er she'rudu Yisrael. What's an Allah is the constant wine with the ger kosher. Right? You can leave it with him for a little bit of time. I shouldn't say you can leave with him wine for a short amount of time. But you can't deposit with him wine for a long time. Now, what's the reason? What are we concerned about here? What are we concerned about here? We're concerned ultimately again that Rashi says Rashi says everywhere. He saw Maniach the Chanusa at Shemilech the Ezra the Akiban the Allah the Nova Ramanasa the Mago the Kambasu the Amma Besa Allah Hashem even the Ino Anah the Ino Maniko the Allah who say this man Muad like a Lefish. So ultimately again we put the present wine with him for a short amount of time. Not for a longer amount of time because they should say that they need swap out the juice wine for his own wine. Okay. And this is true even in a city where the majority of the inhabitants are Jews. So as I said, I love when I say here for sure. You could leave it for a short amount of time. Not for a long time. Again, not to Yain Nessa. Why not to Yain Nessa? Because it's repudiated idolatry. Right? But we are concerned that over time, for a longer amount of time, he may switch his wine for the Jews. So for a short amount of time, it's mutter, for a longer amount of time, also. Shmano, Kiyema. So the says, and his followers like his wife. What is that? Shmano, Kiyes, and I felt Shemen, meat, Kahali, Yayin. It's not definitely going with his oil. Oil can't be into this. Hala, Yemo, Kishmano. Interesting enough, that's what it uses like this. Allah, when I saw that ultimately again his wine, his wine is like his oil, just like just like his oil is permitted, so to ultimately again is wine. Okay, that actually just a moment. Shmano b'Yayas Hayeno Mutabada Shmano Kodim Shotu Hashem Ba'Afilotai about the Shtia Asa. But what does it mean that his oil is like that? Excuse me. What is wine is like his oil? But the same way that you get enough from his oil, you can get enough from his wine. You can't drink the wine that you get from shop, but ultimately you can get enough from his wine. The sharp old dollar ultimately, and for every other thing, Aliyu always is like a he's like an apple. Shimon Omer, Yeno Yayin. Va'amilei Motor. Shimon says his wine is like Yayin. So others say ultimately again, whether it's Motor, ultimately again, for consumption. So there's lots of calls everywhere. We'll pick up in the next section. Actually, let's finish. Let's finish this again. What do you see from here? You see from here that an akum is like is like an akum regarding every other man. The might of himself. Ultimately, again, what does it mean when we say that a Kedusha is like an akum for everything else? What does that mean? To which the Gemara says, love in the back of Avodas Kochanim, Avodas Kochanim. So it doesn't happen because we're again kind of discussing like very Kedusha stuff. That started was we trying to figure out does it get Kedusha to gate idolatry, if you realize the definition idolatry. So now we just got finished saying that in this respect, again, Tosha is unique. But in every other matter, he's like a prophet. Doesn't that mean it just doesn't happen? Can theologically decommission and negate that whole well, so too can it get Tosha? So too can it get Tosha? To which the Gemara says, no, that raise up, no. Meeting the Shus from about the Shus, no. It actually means something else. It means actually for Shabbos. What does it mean for Shabbos? What's it? It's Kidsanya. So, right? The Shabbos Shabbos is just in the physics. If you have multiple homes that open up into a profile, you cannot carry from a home into that profile without an increase. Right? It essentially means we collect food from all of the inhabitants of the they join together, and that joint food makes it into the domain of one whole. If you carry from the home into the chutzner, you pass into the home. But the halacha is if you have a Jew who did not join into the chutzner, he can yield his rights. Let's say if Shabbos started, he forgot to participate in the Eruv. He can yield his rights to the other members of the chutzner. If there is a non-Jewish resident, the halacha is you have to rent his rights. You cannot simply yield his rights, you have to rent his rights from him. It says, Yisrael Miller, the Shamash Shabbos of the Shop, Medaka Lushus. Ultimately, again, you have Yisrael Miller. Unfortunately, again, is Yisrael to an apostate. So as long as externally he's not an apostate, right? As long as externally, like publicly keep Shabbos, privately he doesn't keep Shabbos, and at least in public he keeps Shabbos, and that's the halacha. Medaka Lushus. All he needs to do if he didn't participate in the Eruv, he just needs to essentially yield his rights to someone else in the process. Okay. Shem Yisharu Shabbos of the Shos, in the Vatal Shos, but again, if he publicly violates Shabbos, then essentially he's like an upbringing, then it is not enough for him to yield his rights in the process. Rather, you have to rent his rights. Yisrael, no signatures in the Shos. Right, Yisrael ultimately again has the ability to go ahead and yield his right, give up his rights, or give over his rights to the other residents. With the other Kochanim actually ultimately you have to rent. You have to rent. So therefore again the Gemara is saying that when you say, so also just pause to the Ketzah, over the law, say how does for example yield his right to over his rights? Over the law, you should see clearly. I hereby give over my rights. I my rights in the presence of you, or you should see me tell us that, or my rights are negated to you. So ultimately, it works for the purposes that we Jewish residents acquire the rights of this non-participatory Jew who participates in the Eruv. They talk this custom. So it's just in general about Eruv Chatiros. Again, you need the participation of all Jewish residents. In general, if you are a Jewish resident who did not participate, even on Shabbos, he could yield his rights. Or just simply negate his ownership rights in the country that allows everyone else to utilize the culture. Even if he's in Yisrael Hula, as long as publicly he comes across as Jewish, ultimately again he could yield, or he could go ahead and refuse. By an apple, you have to go ahead and acquire his rights. And Yisrael Hula, who is publicly a Lord, is treated like a also, therefore, when we said before that Ger Kosher ultimately again is treated like an apple for all other things means a chutzner with a Ger Kosher. You choosing a chutzner wants to make it of zeros, they must rent space, they must rent the rights ultimately again of the Ger Kosher. Now, whether or not the Ger Kosher is actually going to be the Tzara, the Master will say, you'll see it tomorrow's daf. Shkaya Chavua, all daf, one of the experience of a specific overview, which you can do.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Great sponsorship to me. Let's all of you this morning begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning church thing. Our annual commentary sponsor. First of all, dedicated to the stream of Russians this year. It's a Swiss from sales tables for Amsterdam. Commentary sponsors for the month of Abadi and Clovis Stephen Randy Drazen in honor of their parents. Israel Drazen, Dina Drazen, and Rosenzweiger in memory of Stanley Rosenzweiger and Rafa. Our week of learning sponsors, Dr. Evan Faith Wolf, expansion of the yard site of Dr. Wolf's father, Cyrus Wolf, Shalom, Ben, Steve Hirsch's father, Rafa, Nathan and Beth Adler in memory of their father, Ben Adler, Father Baruch Mordechai, Ben Morader Ramos. Young sponsors for today, Jerry Avalon, memory of his beloved mother, Rosalind Avalon, Rachel Bas, Rabbi our commentary. The families in the family, all those who live through seven kids, all for the Israel, the 12 which were very efficient, and all the Shalom and the Karov, allow our police soldiers to be successful in the fall and not safe. And also with that, let us begin. Today's that is Samach Dalet 64. Really incredible ground ahead of us. Today we are picking up from Samach Gimel on the base 63b, and we are picking up 2, 4, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom. So we have so again, Nachman Ula, using our copy, Yasser, the Fiaba, Ami Babai. Fiaba Ami is sitting with them. And the Yasser Yasser, the Kabbalah Kobai, he asked the following question. Listen to the fascinating question. Safra Lishbar B'Yayin Nesa. What is the halacha if hires a Jew to smash barrels of yayin? Right? So if they're going to say, I'm going to your event, I'm going to pay $50 an hour. Do me a favor, smash these barrels of yayin. What is the halacha? Is the Jew allowed to receive, to accept, to keep the wages from this world? So remember again, in yesterday's daf, we were dealing with the concept of funds or income that is generated from what may or may not be permitted activities or dealing with items that themselves may be also valuable. So here, the uncle is asking me to do something with the INSF, but he's asking me to destroy the INSF. What he's going to take me for it. So am I allowed to keep those proceeds? The Gemara says, no, we are going to keep the roads between the us. This is very interesting. On one hand, I want the existence of the INS. Now, why do I want the existence of the INS? Because if barrels were to break on their own, I would lose the opportunity to break them, and I'd lose the diagnosis. So, interestingly enough, I want the existence of the INS. So because I want it, therefore, then maybe that makes the process break. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Yeah, we know Kiva, 3 lines up from the bottom of Rashi. The Israel said, let's say the Kiva Shafari Osai. Should actually want the existence of these barrels. Shalom Yishtabu Akshamei Lamb. I don't want to, Ruben doesn't want them to break on their own. Ashi Shabri Good, he does not also. So then we say that since the Jew actually wants, right? This is interesting to think about this way, right? The Jew actually wants the Yayin to remain in existence. I don't want it to break on its own. So therefore, maybe that's considered the closest from Yayin. Therefore, again, it's awesome. On the other hand, this is the instruction of Yayin, instruction of Allah. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. Sure, God's not remain in existence, but again, ultimately, to describe all the Zara is a good thing. Ultimately, again, should be impersonating each other. Or not. So Nachman says, Yishbar and Nachman says, no, take the job, Jew, take the job, get the money, and tell a bracha you should be blessed. You have the opportunity to go and do that on Zara. That is a good thing. Take the money and go. So the rest, let me say it. Let's bring a proof to this. Ain't Oshim, I think